Our story begins in a new season, a new semester at school, and a boy nervous about his first day of class. And by luck or not, he ended up sitting next to the most famous and dangerous girl in his class. Perhaps the most exotic that ever existed, with porcelain skin, red eyes, and this whole combination exuding danger. He only knew her from rumors, but now seeing her up close, she truly seemed peculiar to him. And almost letting a tear fall, Kuroki, our protagonist, was sure they were very different. He always heard gossip about her, and when he had the chance, he paid attention to the news involving Chihara-san. That name never left the mouths of the boys at school when they were gathered and gossiping. And the most diverse theories turned the girl into something almost supernatural. Kuroki was amazed at how much they talked about Maid Chihara, and watching her there beside him, our boy couldn't imagine himself talking to her. When suddenly she looked in his direction, and the boy, of course, trembled to his core. Kuroki looked away, but realizing she was staring, imagined the girl didn't like him analyzing her. He was extremely uncomfortable because from the corner of his eye, he knew she wouldn't stop staring at him. With eyes wide open, Kuroki just wanted to understand why she was doing that. It was embarrassing the way she stared, so he wondered if the girl had gotten mad because he had looked at her. Kuroki felt as if an arrow had pierced his thoughts, and there he was, unable to do anything. But she didn't back down, as if she could read in his expressions how useless he thought he was. Realizing he had to do something, the boy looked back at Chihara, thinking about apologizing, and the girl had already turned her chair toward him. Kuroki trembled just seeing her in that position, not blinking, as if she were a robot or something like that. And not knowing what to do, our boy just hoped she wouldn't put an end to his existence. Then, gathering courage, he managed to say the girl's name with a questioning tone, trying to understand what she wanted after all. But she had gotten up and was walking toward him. Kuroki couldn't help but fix his attention on the girl's obstacles as she approached. However, the greater obstacle was trying to hide it when she did nothing but stare at him. Kuroki trembled from head to toe. It was a path of no return, and he kept searching his mind for excuses for not having avoided looking where he shouldn't. Everything was spinning for the boy, who didn't know where to hide his face due to the situation being out of control. He started looking for the hidden camera because it felt like a prank or some kind of school joke. And he remembered the guys talking about how Chihara noticed people. And he was almost sure that the way she was behaving, she was noticing him at that very moment. Many thoughts overwhelmed poor Kuroki, and if he could, he would grab someone's hand just to cry together. Chihara's eyes were intense and at the same time curious, and I believe we'll talk a lot about them throughout the story. Kuroki then noticed that now, besides staring at him, the girl had raised her arms toward him, and as if she were going to attack, she pulled his neck closer to her, as if to bite him. But Chihara only whispered in the boy's ear that she would like to see his notebook. Kuroki handed his math notebook to Chihara and didn't forget to mention that she was way too close. And the girl, processing the information, went back to her seat, thankful. Kuroki seemed to be in shock, and he realized he was soaked in sweat. But the girl had gotten too close, and with all the rumors, Kuroki didn't know if she was really dangerous. Then she extended her hand to give something to our protagonist, and with a cute smile, she said it was a thank you gift. Kuroki didn't understand but thanked her for the Japanese history book. That's when the teacher's voice echoed in the classroom and everything went back to normal. But there beside Chihara, things had changed for Kuroki. Then, while he remained absorbed, the teacher asked the boy to solve a problem from the lesson, but he didn't seem to be in any condition to answer, because the girl next to him was sleeping with her eyes open, and that scared him. Kuroki couldn't concentrate on the lesson and spent the whole time observing Chihara's behavior, and he found it quite strange when she kept looking at her own wrist. Chihara focused on her wrist with pleasure, and that was the second time Kuroki saw her smile. Kuroki realized that the other girls in the class thought that was bizarre, and to them it was as if Chihara had a certain fondness for blood, which made them frightened. Meanwhile, Kuroki remained beside the girl, thinking it was easy to imagine this behavior coming from Chihara, and thus he became intrigued. After class, our protagonist was walking through the school hallway with the expression of someone who had been haunted by a ghost. Then someone appeared in front of him with something suggestive in their hands. He stared at the person, trying to mumble something while cold sweat trickled down his forehead. And gathering the necessary strength, he finished saying Chihara's name, who was staring at him with her red and mysterious eyes. In front of him, the girl extended her hand holding a pack of gum. And Kuroki was thoughtful, trying to understand what the girl wanted with that. Then he realized that she was simply offering him a piece of the candy. Confused, the boy asked if that gum was for him, while the girl kept her hand extended without saying anything. Chihara stared at him as if in a trance and suddenly began chewing a piece of the gum. Kuroki, with his dead fish expression, watched her chew the gum and understood that she was offering it to him. Faced with the situation, a thought struck the boy like lightning. With her standing there in front of him, he concluded that accepting the gum would be like kissing her indirectly. And even feeling grossed out by the situation, something inside him made him happy because it would be his first time. So not to seem rude, Kuroki decided to accept a piece of the gum. Chihara watched the boy chew the candy as if it were something new. After a brief silence, Kuroki tried to start a conversation instead that he used to chew a gum like that, but smaller. And Chihara, in a creepy way, started smiling at the boy. She then decided to give him the entire pack of gum and turned to leave, but Kuroki called her name. The girl turned around saying the boy's name as if learning a new word and said goodbye naturally. Kuroki also said goodbye and kept reflecting on how interesting she was. Chihara's hands were writing something with a marker, and when the bell rang, we saw that she was focused on her own notes. Her wrist was like a task planner, and the auction to get along with the boy beside her seemed to have been successfully completed. After class, Kuroki was in the bathroom washing his hands, and in front of the mirror, he realized that his first day had started so differently, it didn't even feel real. Because he had always been afraid of popular people, thinking they always hated him. And when he left the bathroom thinking about Chihara, the girl in question was sitting outside as if waiting for him. With trembling words, Kuroki asked if the girl had a problem, but she simply replied that she had seen Kuroki and suggested the two of them could walk home together. And Kuroki found it quite strange that the girl had waited for him in front of the boy's bathroom. They stared at each other while Chihara waited for a response, and she seemed a bit anxious because he wasn't saying anything. But in reality, the boy just had a slow thought process, and to confirm, he asked if she really wanted to go home with him. Not believing it, he asked again if she truly wanted to go with him, and Chihara didn't seem to understand what was so absurd about it. So after thinking about various possibilities that popped into his mind, Kuroki wanted to know why she would do such an atrocity. But the girl widened her eyes, speechless at the boy's reaction, and decided to go alone, imagining she had just been rejected. However, Kuroki, who only acted after a push, asked her to wait and followed her. The girl looked back and answered yes when asked if she was also going home by train. And with his hand on Chihara's backpack, our protagonist informed that he was too, and blushed as he accompanied her to the station. Chihara suddenly stopped and opened her mouth as if she had experienced a system failure. Seeing that, Kuroki wondered if she hadn't felt relieved. Then the girl brought her hand to her ear and slowly began to stabilize. And as if nothing had happened, she looked at Kuroki and signaled for them to continue walking. The two walked side by side, and our protagonist figured that maybe she wasn't so scary after all. And he remembered how she seemed harmless while waiting for him outside the bathroom door. The two reached the bike parking area, and hesitantly, Kuroki asked if the girl rode a bike, but she didn't seem to understand what he meant. So he explained that some people rode their bikes to the station, and Chihara looked at him curiously, as if that was something new to her. But she quickly replied that she didn't ride a bike, and that excited Kuroki, who also didn't have that skill. The boy was startled by his own spontaneity, thinking he had acted as if they were close friends, and Chihara blushed as if she could read his thoughts. And as if lightning had struck his head again, Kuroki kept walking beside her, concluding aloud to himself that the girl didn't know how to ride a bike. They were walking home, but the silence hanging between them was deafening. Kuroki searched for words but couldn't find anything worthy of saying. Chihara continued on her path, and the boy tried to break the silence by calling out to her for a moment. Then he noticed the girl squinting her eyes as if something was bothering her. Kuroki couldn't figure out why Chihara's expression looked that way, and a bit shy, he assumed she was super angry. Feeling his stomach twist with fear, Kuroki nearly soiled his pants trying to make contact with the girl, who said nothing. He tried one last time, but Chihara seemed focused on another spot on the street. The girl pointed in a direction as if she had seen something interesting, and Kuroki tried to follow her gaze. In a rather peculiar way with her cyclops-like eyes, she informed him that she saw a big cat pom-pom. Kuroki, who was looking in the same direction, couldn't see the same thing. The boy only saw a pastry shop with two decorative objects outside the store, and Chihara insisted that she saw two cats stacked like good friends, which worried Kuroki. The boy then asked if her eyes were okay, judging by the contact lenses she wore, but remembered that type of lens didn't have prescription. So Kuroki decided to lend his glasses to Chihara in order to show her they weren't cats. Chihara put the glasses over her red eyes, and Kuroki waited for her conclusion. She then realized what it actually was and removed the glasses, thanking him. The girl started acting strange as if she had entered a trance, and Kuroki noticed she was blushing. And to ease the tension, Kuroki said he also had trouble seeing the objects at first. Chihara chose not to dwell on the subject and asked the boy to forget what had happened, and so he apologized. She began walking as if her head was frying, and Kuroki just watched her. As she walked, our boy thought Chihara looked very cute. But to avoid temptation, he slapped his own cheeks to break the spell. They kept walking, and to spark conversation again, Kuroki asked if she liked cats, but the girl definitely didn't want to talk about that anymore. Kuroki couldn't help but notice how attractive she looked with glasses, and the image of her wearing them messed with his dignity. They arrived at the station, and it was time to part ways as each would take a different line, so they decided to say goodbye. But before that, Chihara dove into her bag and asked him to wait a moment. She took a marker from her bag and asked Kuroki to extend his arm. The boy was confused but obeyed his mysterious muse without objection. The girl wrote on Kuroki's forearm her chat ID, which curiously was lovecat_May. And quite directly, Chihara said she'd like to talk to Kuroki outside of school too. They then said goodbye, and our protagonist seemed quite happy and convinced that she really liked cats. But suddenly something overtook his thoughts, which in fact was something new. He had just gotten a girl's contact, and passing through the station turnstile, he realized it wasn't just any contact, it was Chihara-san's. That kept echoing in his mind all the way home like a scratched record. And when he opened the front door, even with his blank expression, he told his mom he got Chihara-san's contact, and the woman congratulated him. A pair of shoes echoed down the school hallway, and a girl sucking on a lollipop seemed to be waiting in ambush. Chihara was walking when suddenly someone bold had found her. Chihara felt the weight on her back, and a blonde girl grabbed her from behind, smiling and asking what she was doing. The radiant-eyed blonde then invited Chihara into her classroom as if they were old friends. This was Chinatsu Iwakura, who, showing great familiarity, painted our girl's nails because she thought they were too dull. Chihara tried to hold back laughter because of the tickles, but Iwakura didn't care and only thought about how the black nail polish suited her friend. Chinatsu was the talkative and very enthusiastic type, and she said her new boyfriend loved her a lot. She started going on about her love life while Chihara paid more attention to the tickles she felt on her cheek. Quite flushed, Chinatsu revealed that her boyfriend didn't find her annoying, and that seemed like a relief for the girl, who couldn't stop listing her great catch's virtues. With a sparkle in her eyes, Chinatsu felt very grateful that Chihara was always willing to listen to her, and that was a good reason to declare that she loved her friend. Suddenly, Chihara's mouth started bleeding from biting her cheeks so hard to hold back the tickles, and Chinatsu noticed. But checking if all the nails were painted seemed more important, so she asked if she could take some pictures of Chihara's nails, and the girl didn't mind. Chihara remained frozen, and her eager friend sent the photos to her boyfriend, who was an exemplary guy for always replying quickly to her messages. And to prove it, she showed her friend the evidence with her phone in hand. Chinatsu stared at the screen as if her life depended on it, and it only took 7 seconds for the message to be marked as read. Then with pride and relief, she smiled as she showed Chihara how fast he was. It was clear from Chihara's look that something wasn't quite clear to her, so she decided to ask her friend a question. The girl paid attention as Chihara, with her mysterious gaze, asked why she had sent the message. Very patiently, Chinatsu replied that they both liked to share what they were doing, so it became clear to her that sending messages brought people closer. Chinatsu looked at her friend for a moment and smiled, confirming she was happy that she understood. Then curious, the girl wanted to know if Chihara was trying to get close to someone, and like two headlights, her eyes agreed in response. Amazed, the friend expressed how cute she thought Chihara was, and she decided to give her a makeover like a little doll while Chihara just watched silently. So Chinatsu continued excitedly, telling her friend not to worry, and like a robot, she agreed with everything. Kuroki was sitting on the couch thinking about watching a movie before bed when suddenly his phone rang. He looked at the device in shock. It was a notification from Chihara-san, and when he opened the message, he saw that the girl had sent a picture of a bowl of udon. Kuroki pondered what to reply and decided to tell her that he had eaten fried mackerel for dinner. The boy got nervous, wondering if he had done the right thing. Jumping on the couch, he couldn't hide his anxiety until his phone rang again. Then, when he opened the chat, he saw that she had replied with a cat sticker, and for the boy, that seemed like okay. Still looking at his phone, Kuroki found it funny that someone as mysterious as Chihara ate udon, but deep down, he scolded himself for thinking that way. And on the other side, the girl stared at her phone, confused as if something had stunned her, until someone called her to take a bath. Kuroki was on his way to school and he noticed two guys talking about Chihara, which had become more than natural to him. And thoughtfully, our boy even agreed with them, considering the behavior she usually showed. However, what most intrigued Kuroki was that Chihara didn't care about the rumors and didn't give any attention to the speculation about her. So kind of gossiping behind the boys, he decided to join the conversation. As if he were someone special, he simply said he didn't think Chihara was as evil as people judged her to be, and he passed by the guys boasting that he wasn't afraid of the mysterious girl. Little did Kuroki know that they were only talking about seeing Chihara fall off a bike while practicing. Curious, the guys followed Kuroki and called him over to talk. They seemed interested in knowing what kind of relationship our protagonist had with the dark girl. And they concluded that Kuroki barely talked to anyone and found it strange that he spoke up just when they were talking about Chihara. One of the boys was practically wide-eyed with curiosity to know what the two were doing behind the scenes, as if she had turned Kuroki into a vampire. Kuroki started recalling his moments with Chihara and thought there wouldn't be a problem in telling them that the girl had given him gum. But in a bizarre twist, the boy revealed that she had given him a razor blade, and the guys immediately imagined that Kuroki had been initiated into some ninja organization or something like that. To top it off, our naive protagonist, still smiling, mentioned that it was very nice and nostalgic. They were desperate trying to understand what the two were doing together, because despite sitting close, they were very different, and Kuroki agreed with that. It was obvious to everyone in class that Kuroki was an extremely normal boy, while Chihara exuded that dangerous air. But our boy knew that despite the bad impressions, people didn't know the other side of the girl, and he felt that he couldn't just say what he thought about the way he saw her. So he tried to say something that wouldn't compromise her and decided to reveal to the boys that Chihara liked pom-poms, but he wasn't specific that they were cat pom-poms. With vivid imaginations, the boys started wondering how this combination of blades and pom-poms played into Kuroki and Chihara's relationship. Realizing that the boys were super excited about his stories, Kuroki decided to tell them that she also wrote on his body with a marker. And naturally, they imagined this scene in the most bizarre way possible. Completing his narrative, Kuroki informed them that it was after serving as a notepad that he discovered how much Chihara liked cats. So it was harder for the boys to start their day with the information that Kuroki had his body marked with the phrase, "I love kittens." because for them, that was as impactful as a planetary alignment or even a solar flare. Kuroki had talked so much that he was startled to see the expression on the boys' faces. They were so bewildered by the information that they were at a loss for words, and so they decided it was better not to ask anything else about the subject. Kuroki felt embarrassed because the truth is that our boy was a terrible storyteller. Then, thinking about Chihara, the boy realized that he had nothing to give in return for the gum he had received. He walked through the school hallway wondering if she might find such an action gross, but he didn't want to ignore the girl's kindness. So he went to look for her in the classroom next door, where she usually went during break time. Chinatsu was in the room and looked curiously at Kuroki. Very helpful, she asked if the boy was looking for someone, and she was a bit incredulous when Kuroki replied that he'd like to talk to Chihara. The girl then informed him that Chihara was in the infirmary due to a headache, so Kuroki thanked her and left. Chinatsu walked to the classroom door as the boy left and judged him for acting like a grade schooler. In the infirmary, Chihara-san was resting with an ice pack on her head, which hurt terribly from the fall she took on the bike. In the infirmary and groaning in pain, our protagonist was being treated for a wound on his forehead that looked injured. After dressing Kuroki's wound, the nurse informed him that he would be fine despite having lost a lot of blood, and the boy thanked her for her kindness. She also warned him to see a doctor if he didn't feel well, and the boy inspected his wound, trying to understand how it had happened. He had been walking to the classroom as usual, when suddenly he collided with the shoulder of a giant from the judo club, and he felt his body thrown against the window, shattering the glass and also his head. He was then carried by the giant student to the infirmary. Very considerate, the judo guy even apologized and gave his card to Kuroki in case he needed anything, maybe a new head. The nurse decided to take the medical note to the next class's teacher, and Kuroki figured he could do it himself. However, the woman decided that he needed to rest because he was dizzy, and the boy ended up agreeing. He stayed there, sitting on the infirmary couch, just existing, when a noise came from beside him. Kuroki was worried about the next class and didn't notice Chihara silently slipping through the curtains. Suddenly, he looked at the curtains, which quickly closed as if they had never been moved. Kuroki turned to the opposite side, and Chihara appeared from between the curtains again. The boy stood up suddenly and stood still in front of the couch, feeling that someone else inhabited the room. Kuroki grew suspicious of the curtain and looked back in that direction. But since he saw nothing, he closed his eyes and sighed in relief, unaware that Chihara was secretly watching him. Then he felt Chihara's cold whisper in his ear, asking where he had gotten hurt. Kuroki, who hadn't noticed the girl's presence, trembled like a church bell on Sunday. Little by little, he recovered and greeted the girl behind him as if she were a ghost. Kuroki told her he had hit his head when she asked, and Chihara, curious, wanted to know if it hurt when touched. Distracted, he said it didn't hurt anymore while the girl watched him with a sadistic look. She brought her hands to Kuroki's head to examine the wound more closely, and Kuroki blushed as he looked into the girl's eyes so closely, while she also stared back at him intensely. Feeling awkward, the boy pushed Chihara away and asked if she was also in pain, breaking the tension that had built up. The girl replied yes, lowering her head as if a cat had denied her a little affection. Then they heard a noise in the hallway and were startled. The nurse entered the room, informing Kuroki that she had already spoken with his math teacher. When she realized he was no longer there and assumed the boy had returned to the classroom, she kept wondering if she had passed by him. But in truth, the boy was hiding with Chihara on the bed behind the curtains. That was when the principal distracted the nurse, calling her to accompany him to the teacher's room. Meanwhile, Kuroki remained silent in front of Chihara, who was watching him from behind. Slowly, she lowered her mouth to the level of Kuroki's neck, and the boy was left speechless. But he simply whispered that his head hurt because of the bump that had formed. Clueless, the boy turned around and pressed the hematoma on the girl's head. Chihara snapped her fingers, and Kuroki imagined she wanted to return the pain as penance. He closed his eyes, waiting for his punishment, and she stared at him seriously. Suddenly, she grabbed his shoulders and violently pushed him backward. Kuroki fell sitting on the bed, wondering what the girl was going to do to him next. She opened the curtain to check if anyone was in the room as a witness, and simply left the bed, staring at Kuroki, who remained seated, watching her. Then, with a calm expression, Chihara wished Kuroki a good rest. The curtains closed, and the boy was confused to realize she was actually concerned about him. Kuroki looked at the pillow, but knew it would be hard to sleep since the girl's scent still lingered in the place, and at his age, that was a trigger. It was morning, and Chihara, with a bandage on her head, was brushing her teeth while still sleepy. She rinsed her mouth nicely, followed by a gargle to clean thoroughly. She buttoned her shirt and put on her sweater, getting ready for another routine day. Leaving home, she said she was heading to school, and a voice asked if she hadn't forgotten anything, to which the girl replied no, or rather, yes. While people moved normally through the train station, something about Chihara caught the attention of those passing by her side, but the girl couldn't understand why so many judgmental stares. So she decided to look down to see if something was different about her and realized what was going on. She was wearing a pair of very eccentric shoes, which, by the way, seemed to bother those who crossed her path. Chihara felt invaded by so many stares and murmurs, not knowing what to do. She thought about going back to change them, but that would definitely make her late for school. So she thought of Chinatsu, imagining what advice the girl would give her, and clearly envisioned her friend telling her that everything would be fine. Thus, she decided not to worry and continued on her way normally. At school, a teacher greeted the arriving students, wishing them a good morning. But when Chihara passed by, something caught the woman's attention. Hearing her name, Chihara stopped and turned to the teacher, waiting to be scolded. The woman paused, wondering how to tell the girl that she couldn't wear something so flashy, but tried to understand her reason for doing so. Then unexpectedly, the teacher placed her hands on the girl's shoulders and said she understood everything. Chihara went to her locker and noticed that something else was different. She had picked up the wrong coat and figured she must have switched it while folding clothes in the laundry. Then nervously, she thought of Chinatsu telling her that even when things went wrong, she should remain confident. So she put on the flashy coat and headed without worries to gym class. But the excess of confidence didn't work out very well, and she was called during break to the principal's office, where she was instructed to write an apology letter as a warning. That's when her phone rang and she picked it up to check. Her father had sent her a message saying she had forgotten her lunch at home. Chihara put her hands in her pocket and realized she only had 3 coins. And under the circumstances, she was only able to buy 3 candies to line her stomach. This became another reason for gossip, but Chihara didn't seem to care, enjoying her tasty sweets. Perhaps her biggest concern was that she was still hungry, so she heard someone calling her. Kuroki was the only one brave enough at school to ask if she was going to eat only candies for lunch. And showing concern, he wanted to know if that kind of meal was enough for her. But without replying, she just stared at him. Then, seeking more openness, the boy asked if there was a reason behind her eating so poorly. But still getting no answer, the boy turned forward and apologized for the misunderstanding. That's when Kuroki took his rice ball and offered it to the girl. He explained that he had 2, and just one was enough to satisfy his hunger. Then he opened the rice ball's wrapper, telling her that his mom had made it with leftovers from dinner, and even though it was cold, it tasted good. Chihara widened her eyes, and Kuroki asked if she didn't like rice balls. But in fact, she loved them, and her eyes almost sparkled with emotion. Kuroki felt satisfied being able to share his meal with Chihara and smiled as he admired the girl eating. Then he turned to the front with such lightness that he even thought Chihara's shoes were super cool. When you're alone on the first day of school, it's nice to make friends with the person sitting next to you. But that person isn't just nice to you, they're nice to the whole school. Then you realize you have only one friend, but that friend has many. And thus begins the phenomenon, "You're my only friend, but I am not your only friend." With that reflection, we begin the chapter where the teacher asks the students to form pairs. During English class, that's what the teacher requested, and Chihara immediately thought of Kuroki to accompany her in the task. However, when she tried to talk to him, she noticed the boy was chatting with other guys. Then Chihara felt like a lightning bolt had struck her, as she got no partner for the exercise. All the students were moving around to find their pairs, always ignoring Chihara as if she were a demonic aberration. Thus, Chihara remained isolated in her dense aura until Kuroki turned around to talk to her. He suggested the two of them do the assignment together, and that felt like a blow of flowers to Chihara's dignity. Kuroki then explained that he had gotten the task with the other guys but ended up being excluded. The girl felt so relieved that she couldn't even respond. So Kuroki apologized, thinking she might already have a partner, but quite eagerly she replied that she didn't have anyone and felt happy to work with him. Later, Kuroki was out on the street looking stylish with his crossbody fanny pack, reading a message from his family about which cake to buy for his little sister's birthday, when suddenly he saw Chihara walking around distracted. He kept thinking about what to do since it was the first time he'd seen her outside of school hours. The boy then involuntarily stepped away, pondering whether or not to go talk to her right there in front of him. But the idea that she might be waiting for someone made him give up. So Kuroki turned his back and went on his way to take care of his errands, but this time it was Chihara who noticed him nearby. She even called out to him but was interrupted by a man who asked for a moment of her attention. It was a photographer who asked permission to take some pictures of her, and Chihara, without answering, could only think of Kuroki. The photographer took her silence as a yes and asked the girl to pose while pointing the camera. Kuroki came out of the pastry shop carrying a box of profiteroles and by a twist of fate crossed paths with Chihara again, walking in the opposite direction. Certain that the girl was alone, Kuroki gathered the courage to greet her, but a noise from below stopped him. A little girl was crying, lost, and our boy couldn't ignore her. Chihara noticed and returned to see what was happening. Kuroki sat on the ground and tried to get information from the little girl to help find her mother. Chihara wanted to help, but something held her back. Her exotic and mysterious eyes usually triggered children to start crying even more. Then the girl spotted a specific store and had $1 million idea. Meanwhile, Kuroki kept trying to calm the crying girl who wouldn't stop. And suddenly, Chihara appeared behind Kuroki with a cute mask to hide her eyes and not scare the baby. The little girl stopped crying and asked if she was the adorable and cheerful girl, to which Chihara replied yes. Kuroki was left speechless, just watching the two talk about the character on the mask. The boy kept trying to understand what Chihara was doing, but it clearly worked because the little girl stopped crying and they were chatting away. With the situation under control, the adorable cardboard girl informed them that there was a police post nearby. And while the two laughed and played, Kuroki realized Chihara had been observing him the whole time and decided to help him. Then the little girl's mother appeared and took her daughter away, relieved, while Kuroki thanked Chihara for helping solve the problem. Watching mother and daughter leave, Kuroki revealed that he didn't feel trustworthy. So Chihara took the adorable girl's mask and placed it on Kuroki's head. She looked deeply into Kuroki's eyes and said sincerely that he was a trustworthy person. Kuroki removed the mask and blushed upon realizing that she believed that. Then they decided to spend the rest of the day together, and Chihara mentioned she had visited a cat cafe, which to Kuroki didn't seem like news. It was lunchtime at school, and the students were leaving the classroom to enjoy their break. Kuroki looked to the side and saw that Chihara was still in the classroom opening her bag. Then the girl took out a lunchbox, and Kuroki found it curious since it was rare to see her stay in the room during lunch, the last time being when she ate sweets. Kuroki also knew that she usually stayed alone when not with Chinatsu, and so the two of them started opening their lunchboxes in the classroom. Seizing the opportunity, our protagonist invited the girl to have lunch together, and he chose the school rooftop to avoid curious looks. Even so, he asked if he was bothering her, as his self-esteem wasn't great, but the girl with chopsticks in hand didn't understand the question. So trying to comfort him, she decided to talk and said that the weather was nice. Nervous about the moment, Kuroki thought it was a good opportunity to say that he didn't have many friends and that he was happy she talked to him when they met on the street. He also mentioned that he'd like to return the favor when Chihara suddenly dropped her chopsticks. The object bounced and slipped down over the balcony. They only had time to watch the object flee and conclude that the chopsticks were gone forever. But Chihara didn't seem to mind and said she would eat anyway, and Kuroki was shocked to see that she would eat with her hands. So the boy decided to give her his chopsticks, as he hadn't used them yet. Chihara looked at Kuroki, thinking that maybe he didn't mind eating with his hands, but in reality, his intention was to use them after she finished. Concerned, Chihara warned Kuroki that when it was his turn, he'd have to eat quickly, but he said he was already used to it. Then Chihara had the idea that they could take turns eating and finish in time. Kuroki brought his hand to his mouth, taking the idea of an indirect kiss seriously. He even thought about flipping the chopsticks around, but that would definitely be rude to the girl. However, seeing her eat, he imagined she wouldn't mind, as it was a respectful gesture on his part. Suddenly, Chihara took the chopsticks to Kuroki's lunchbox, and the boy didn't know how to react. He just watched her chew the piece she took from his plate, curious. And Chihara chewed for a while without much expression. In her mind, she imagined the boy would also take food from her plate, and that would seal a great friendship. But reality was different, and the girl only commented that she had failed at communicating. Chihara picked up a rice ball from her lunchbox, and the boy noticed how much brown food there was on the plate. She took the initiative and handed the chopsticks to the boy with a piece of tamagoyaki. Chihara confessed that the taste was strange because it was slightly sweet, and Kuroki revealed that his mother put sugar in mayonnaise as if it were a family specialty. Chihara then felt curious about how her own family made tamagoyaki and decided she would ask her father, and Kuroki became curious about the man cooking. The girl said that her father also made omurice when he was in a good mood, and Kuroki thought it was interesting to bring that typical dish to school. Then, in the middle of the conversation about family cooking, Chihara invited Kuroki to try a meal at her house. She looked at him with her red, intimidating eyes while the boy processed the information. Kuroki got nervous just thinking about entering Chihara's house, but he didn't want to be rude by refusing. So he started sweating cold, and with wide eyes, he impulsively responded that he didn't want to go. Chihara just widened her eyes while the boy tried to explain himself. After class inside Genki cafeteria, Chihara was staring at an omurice sign, wishing to eat her father's version, and coincidentally, that was his cafeteria. It was 7 in the morning, and Chinatsu entered Chihara's room full of energy. With a sparkle in her eye, the girl was sure she would have a lot of fun using Chihara for a makeover session. It was the day for makeup and trying on new clothes. The two toasted with energy drink cans and shoved them down. Chihara instantly felt the effect and asked if her friend was feeling okay. With pure vigor, the friend replied that everything was great. Chihara thought it was better to brush her teeth and wash her face before starting the girly activities while Chinatsu waited. When everything was ready, Chinatsu took out her magic suitcase and got to work. Chihara had on a facial mask and was supposed to leave that plaster on for 15 minutes until it had the desired effect. She felt it hardening her face but couldn't remove or move it until the treatment was over. Meanwhile, Chinatsu was thinking about what kind of clothes to put on her personal little doll. Then she began showing some outfits to Chihara, who tried not to force her facial expressions because of the mask. Chinatsu was unsure, and with a tightly held pout, Chihara tried to help by choosing the most intense outfit. Her friend then pondered which accessory would best match such a look. 15 minutes passed, and Chihara removed the facial mask, feeling her skin different. Chinatsu picked up a strange object she called a curler and explained it needed to be heated before use. Then the makeup session began, and her friend was amazed at how Chihara looked like a soft porcelain doll. In the next outfit, Chihara, in Chinatsu's opinion, looked like a royal descendant of dolls, which made her blush. One more look, and Chihara's cuteness was out of this world. And to finish, the darkest one, which made Chinatsu explode with emotion, calling her cute. She was excited and found everything very fun, while Chihara, with her usual expression, simply replied yes. Satisfied, her friend lay on the floor looking at the ceiling, imagining what it would be like if they could have gone out to show everyone that she was Chihara's best friend. Still, Chinatsu concluded she could do better next time, and for Chihara, it wouldn't be a problem if she arrived after noon. Later, Kuroki stared wide-eyed at his phone. It was a picture of Chihara all dolled up, asking for the boy's opinion on the look. Admiring the image while lying in bed, Kuroki thought the girl even looked like a magazine cover model, though it was unclear what type of magazine he meant. At school, the rumors about Chihara only increased, and the latest buzz among the girls was her cold skin, like that of a doll. On the other hand, in the classroom, Kuroki was cold. The wind coming through the window was icy and biting. Kuroki wondered if he was the only one feeling so cold, and he regretted not bringing a coat. Luckily for him, Chihara closed the window. The boy blushed, thinking she might have closed it because of him, or perhaps she was just cold too, and so the two stared at each other for a while. When the bell rang, Chihara got up and walked toward Kuroki. She grabbed his cheeks firmly, and the boy was startled by her sudden action. Kuroki panicked because the girl's eyes were threatening, like an animal ready to devour its prey. However, Chihara merely commented on how warm he was, and the boy didn't know what to say. She wouldn't let go for anything, and Kuroki felt embarrassed since everyone in the classroom was watching. Curious students whispered among themselves, wondering if the two were really going to kiss. So Kuroki moved Chihara's hands away, but she just wanted to confirm if he was cold. Our protagonist was intrigued that she had noticed. Very thoughtful, the girl began to pull a blanket out of her bag, and Kuroki said she didn't have to bother. Chihara then explained it was a gift she had never used, but for Kuroki, that was even more reason not to use it. Then, with an intimidating look, Chihara warned that he would catch a cold if he didn't use the blanket. The teacher entered the room and announced that the next class was about to begin. Chihara thought Kuroki looked very cute with his blanket, and the boy in turn seemed very embarrassed, wrapped in kittens embroidered all over. The week came to an end, and Kuroki only thought about going home to rest when Chihara called out to him. A little flustered, he answered the girl and realized she had been waiting for him every day so they could go home together. Kuroki knew that sometimes she went home with Chinatsu, but the girl seemed to have other friends and occasionally left Chihara alone. So he ended up being her second option, and somehow Kuroki felt strange that she had chosen him, but even so they walked on together. Suddenly, Chihara knelt in front of Kuroki, placing her hand on his stomach, and the boy was startled. Shyly, she brought her hand to her mouth and said she wanted to know if the boy was hungry, and Kuroki was puzzled how she would know that just by touching him. But Chihara explained that anyone would be hungry after class, and Kuroki agreed. They then stopped in front of the snack shop, and she invited him for a bite. Kuroki started imagining what kind of snack someone like Chihara would order and concluded it would be something like milk tea with tapioca and lots of cream. He asked if the girl went to that place often, but Chihara replied that she went sometimes. Then she showed her routine to the boy by taking 100 yen from her pocket. She entered the shop and chose a sweet treat that to Kuroki seemed like the behavior of an elementary school girl blowing her allowance on silly things. But that day, the girl thought about doing something different, and when they left the snack shop, she had bought some chicken. Chihara said it was the crispy, well-fried kind, and Kuroki wanted to know if she had tried it before, but the girl said no. She then revealed that she usually doesn't eat meat when she's alone, but in the presence of friends, the craving gets stronger. Chihara began nibbling on the piece of chicken, and by the way she wiped her mouth, it must have been tasty, though a bit greasy, which made her lick her lips, and Kuroki blushed at the sight. The boy had perverted thoughts that were quickly interrupted when Chihara asked him for a napkin. Chihara pointed out where she was dirty, but Kuroki, being slow to process things, took a while to understand, until he realized what she wanted, but that kind of situation made him extremely embarrassed, even if it were with family. But the boy couldn't refuse and slowly brought the napkin to Chihara's mouth. She asked him to wipe it more times, and Kuroki didn't know where to hide his face. Chihara looked at Kuroki with satisfaction, and the boy figured she might be happy about what happened. With her mouth now clean, Chihara decided to take another bite of the chicken, and Kuroki nearly fell back in indignation. He questioned the girl, saying it would have been better to clean up after finishing the whole meal. But Chihara pondered over Kuroki's logic, and the boy made a point to ask if she had really understood what he meant. At the bookstore, romance manga was trending, but Kuroki was looking for a specific edition, until he found it and pulled it from the shelf, checking if it was the latest release, and suddenly Chihara appeared asking if he liked manga. She always did that, but our protagonist never got used to it and was startled when he realized the girl was there, greeting him in the bookstore. Kuroki didn't expect to find her there and explained that it was a magazine his younger sister had asked him to buy. The boy asked what Chihara was doing there, but she didn't know what to answer right away. Then she remembered and showed a book about building castles, and Kuroki figured she was the type to buy the whole volume. The interesting cover of the magazine that was for Kuroki's younger sister caught Chihara's attention, and she asked what the story was about. So Kuroki explained, looking at the copy, that it was about a girl who threw punches to become a star, and Chihara seemed to understand the theme. Curious, she said she would also like to read the manga, and Kuroki warned her it was a story for elementary school students. Chihara then made a point of reminding him that he had read it too, but Kuroki justified himself by saying he'd read anything. Then the boy started thinking about what kind of story would be nice for Chihara to read, and remembering her peculiar tastes, he concluded what kind of style would suit her. And he handed over the manga about the punch-throwing girl to Chihara since his little sister was probably swamped with homework. Chihara felt flattered by the gift, and Kuroki noticed something important. The two of them were already exchanging manga, and as they walked, he realized they were becoming closer friends. To return the gesture, Chihara gave her book about castles to Kuroki. The boy was incredulous but thanked her right after. When Kuroki opened the door to his house, his little sister came running toward him, asking about the manga. Then she started tugging on her brother's pants out of pure excitement and anticipation for the magazine. Kuroki opened his bag and pulled out the book about castles, handing it to the little girl, who didn't seem to mind much and knelt down to devour the pages eagerly. Chihara had also gotten home, and her father greeted her while she hummed. The man found it odd and asked what was going on with her. Chihara then turned to her father and showed him the manga about the punch-throwing girl, asking if she could read it later, though something inside her told her she had no chance. At Chihara's house, which was also the Genki Cafe, her father called her over quickly. The man handed her a bag of fruit to take to their neighbor Matsumoto-san in return for some vegetables, and the girl didn't object. Looking at the bag, Chihara asked her father if he knew what the neighbor had done, and with a sparkle in her eyes, she said the neighbor now had a cat. Chihara went to the city in her school uniform and passed a small shop that sold toys for cats. At the neighbor's house, she showed the little gift she had bought for the kitty, excited to see it. Then she handed over the fruit from her father, and the neighbor thanked her shyly. Chihara entered Matsumoto-san's house as the neighbor went to the kitchen to get tea and sweets for the guest. But the girl seemed obsessed with seeing the cat and searched for it as if she had X-ray vision, until suddenly she noticed a little white paw approaching. The cat looked at Chihara, somewhat curious, and the girl stared back at it with a sadistic gaze. It stopped at the doorway, watching her as if it recognized those eyes. Then Chihara threw a little toy to it, trying to be friendly, but the cat didn't move a whisker. She crouched down and slowly approached, and the kitten, gathering some courage, placed its paw on the toy. Chihara became entranced by the animal and gently stroked its chin. The kitten stayed still, and the girl lay down on the floor, admiring it as if nothing else in the world mattered. Unable to resist, the girl opened her hoodie, and when the neighbor returned with the feast, she was stunned. Chihara had placed the kitten inside her sweatshirt and was hugging it as if it were a pillow. The neighbor said she had picked it up the day before and that it was very gentle, but Chihara had already found that out on her own. Melting, Chihara stroked it more, saying it was cute and warm. Then the neighbor said she hadn't yet chosen a name for the animal, and asked if the girl had any suggestions. But judging by the kitten's face, it didn't seem too thrilled with the idea. Chihara held the kitten and looked deep into its eyes as if she already knew what she would call it. At school, Chihara entered the classroom and walked by Kuroki, while humming, and he followed her with his eyes. She then turned to the boy and wished him good morning with her enigmatic look, and Kuroki stammered a reply. Politely, Kuroki asked if something good had happened, and Chihara took advantage of the great opportunity. She stepped closer, showing her phone to the boy, who began to get nervous. Then she opened a photo of the neighbor's kitten, and Kuroki, finding it very cute, asked what its name was. Chihara stared at Kuroki and said the cat's name was Kuro, and the boy wanted to know why. A high school student arrived excitedly with a mysterious bag, and Chinatsu, who was watching beside Chihara, found the group pretty lively. Chihara was curious about what they were up to, and Chinatsu seemed to already know since it was a recent trend. Chihara still didn't understand, so her friend explained that they were going to make Russian roulette dumplings, a kind of recipe where they mixed a little mustard, wasabi, Tabasco sauce, and other ingredients. Chihara then asked if Chinatsu had ever done something like that, but she replied she preferred to enjoy her dumplings. However, she didn't rule out the idea of participating in the prank at the right moment. Chinatsu said she'd even be happy if her boyfriend ate one in her place. And to a curious Chihara, the girl explained that if her boyfriend wasn't around, then she would eat it herself. Then, with the conversation cut short, Chinatsu left for her classroom, and Chihara was left wondering how her friend could find it fun for her boyfriend to eat something she herself was afraid of, when suddenly she heard someone calling Kuroki. The boy was being approached by other students who pressured him to eat the so-called Russian dumpling while he seemed a bit reluctant. Chihara noticed and watched the situation from a distance. One of the students explained the ingredients in the dumpling, while the others hoped Kuroki would get the bad one, simply because they thought he was dumb. With no way to escape, Kuroki just agreed and had to choose among the dumplings on the tray, where one was altered. Always naive, our boy asked if they were trying to trick him, and with deadpan faces, the students obviously said no. Kuroki then chose a dumpling, but before he could bring it to his mouth, Chihara stepped in and grabbed his arm, leaving the students stunned. She stared at Kuroki as if scolding him for being so foolish. The girl took the dumpling from Kuroki's hand and began chewing, while the students waited anxiously for her reaction. Nothing happened, and Chihara grabbed a second dumpling and put it in her mouth. Kuroki and the others watched as she chewed without stopping. Chihara finished swallowing the second dumpling, and her expression remained calm. Then, to the students' disappointment and frustration, she announced it wasn't spicy and didn't hurt. But there was still one last dumpling, and Kuroki, holding it in his hand, was sure that was the altered one. So the boy put the dumpling in his mouth with fear, while Chihara didn't take her eyes off him. Curious, one of the girls asked if he was okay as Kuroki swallowed, and calmly he said that although it wasn't tasty with all the spicy ingredients, he was fine. Besides that, he said he ate the altered dumpling so as not to waste food. Everyone was in disbelief that it hadn't fazed the boy, and they apologized for the prank attempt, though a bit uneasy. Kuroki watched the students walk away and almost didn't notice Chihara behind him like a ghost. Then he turned around in surprise, as he always did, but the girl only wanted to know if he was okay, while the class looked on curiously, imagining they were going to kiss. With a calm expression, Chihara seemed happy that Kuroki wasn't in pain. They stared at each other, and Kuroki felt awkward, while the class watched like an audience. Kuroki tried to say something, and suddenly Chihara grabbed his hand and said it was covered in sauce. Then she opened her mouth voraciously and showed her canines to Kuroki, who shouted her name. Kuroki was walking around the city on his day off when he noticed an alley full of restaurants he had never been to. He stopped in front of a Chinese restaurant and decided to go in and take a look. He sat at one of the tables and noticed that the previously empty place now seemed to be filling with customers. Kuroki noticed that even though they were sitting at separate tables, it was as if everyone knew each other. He studied the behavior of those present and deduced that from the handshakes, some were meeting for the first time. The waiter approached, and Kuroki ordered a super spicy tofu while thinking about the possibility of having a date at a Chinese restaurant. Then someone with black hair entered the place. But Kuroki was just chilling, waiting for his order and organizing the next steps of his peaceful day. He noticed the customers stood up, a bit euphoric, and he grew curious about what was happening. Then he was caught by surprise when he saw Chihara-san surrounded by the people there. Kuroki held the menu in front of his face, trying to imagine what she was doing at the restaurant, and he found it strange when they welcomed the girl and asked to take pictures with her. While the waiter placed his order on the table, Kuroki unleashed his detective instinct to connect the dots between Chinese restaurant, group gathering, and Chihara-san. The girl went to the counter to look at the menu while the customers followed her as if she were a goddess. Then Chihara decided to order a gyoza, and the customers, in unison, did the same. Kuroki wanted to understand why everyone was copying her, and suddenly the customers started applauding her. The boy couldn't understand anything anymore, and from a distance, watched those people gather around the celebrity. Kuroki sat there thinking that his plans to leave had changed with Chihara's presence under those circumstances, and concluded it was worth the risk out of curiosity. Chihara looked different, tying her hair while waiting for her gyoza dish. The waiter placed the meal on the girl's table, and the customers watched her prepare as if they were watching a football match. She then adjusted her chopsticks and thanked God for the meal. And so she began to eat slowly, savoring each bite while her private audience patiently admired her. Kuroki felt uncomfortable with how quiet everyone was. The silence was broken by a voice announcing this was the 23rd time the girl had visited a famous restaurant, and everyone seemed eager for her evaluation of the dish. Chihara looked at those present with her intimidating style and began to discuss the dish in a technical and cold way, as if she had all the information stored on a hard drive. Kuroki felt empty, as if he didn't know the girl. One of the customers, taking advantage of the opportunity, asked the celebrity what was the best way to eat a gyoza. And as if she were ChatGPT, she gave a complete report on how the meal should be eaten. Our protagonist had never seen Chihara talk so much as she did that afternoon. One of the customers felt emotional witnessing the girl's feedback about the gyoza paku. Kuroki, scratching his chin, speculated that he might be facing a gyoza fan club, and Chihara-san, in her new style, was the idol of all those people. Kuroki kept remembering the Chihara he knew and could never have imagined her that way. He observed how accustomed the girls seemed to all that attention, and thought it strange that she had never mentioned anything about it, and no one at school had commented, while she received a plush gyoza at that mysterious event. Then absorbed in thought, Kuroki imagined he might be the only one who had this information and felt honored because of it, but then thought it was silly to think that way. The next day, Kuroki decided to ask what Chihara's favorite food was, and she answered anything but gyoza. A holiday was coming, and the teacher announced that he would be applying that basic optional point, which for Kuroki wasn't a bad idea, and he started thinking about what he would do with 3 days off, already planning to sleep and play video games. But deep down, what he really wanted was to do something fun, like go out somewhere and invite someone. In other words, Chihara. But that thought was soon suppressed by his lack of self-esteem, as the boy didn't consider himself that close to her. Meanwhile, Chihara looked at him from the side, perhaps imagining the same thing. A few days earlier, Chinatsu had asked Chihara if she'd like to invite a friend to hang out, and the girl dryly answered yes. And as if it were the most natural thing in the world, Chinatsu suggested she just go ahead and invite him. But Chihara wasn't used to doing that and didn't know what to say, even though she wanted to go out. Then Chinatsu encouraged her, telling her exactly what to say since he was her friend. For a moment, Chinatsu wondered if Chihara was referring to a girl, but the girl made it clear she wasn't. Chinatsu's eyes sparkled as always when it came to helping her friend or working on her aesthetics. And as if her friend's life depended on it, she could already imagine Chihara all dolled up like a little doll. So, unable to contain her impulse, Chinatsu practically ordered Chihara to come to her house before inviting that friend. Back to Kuroki's present, after thinking about the holiday, the boy looked at his phone, a bit curious. There was a message from Chihara asking him to meet her at the station. Kuroki looked to the side and noticed she wasn't there anymore and figured she'd left so quickly he didn't even realize. But he kept wondering what she was trying to do. Kuroki arrived at the station, and oddly enough, Chihara wasn't there, but the boy seemed excited despite feeling embarrassed about waiting. While waiting, Kuroki reflected that lately he'd been going along with a lot of Chihara's whims, and remembering how striking her appearance was, it was even scary to imagine what exactly she wanted to do. Then Kuroki's thoughts were interrupted when he heard someone call him. Chihara arrived all dressed up with cute bows in her hair, apologizing for being late. Kuroki stammered with a dumb look on his face and could only ask where she wanted to go with that hairstyle. But realizing it was a rude question, Kuroki touched his chin and tried to rephrase. Staring at the girl all dolled up, he chose instead to say she could cancel whatever she had planned with him, and all tangled up, he realized that wasn't her intention. Kuroki then smiled slightly, feeling that even if his connection with Chihara was strange, it was nice that she had changed her hairstyle because of him or invited him to do something, even though he didn't know what it was. Kuroki tried to repress his positive thoughts as he always did, but this time he let himself go, just like when he met Chihara sitting beside him despite his fear. And with his eyes closed, he drifted into thoughts about how their relationship had developed. Chihara began to lose patience from being replaced by imagination and called Kuroki, but he didn't respond because he was becoming an adult. Can you believe it? So the girl poked Kuroki's cheek to burst his continuous thought bubbles. She had to poke so deep, she even scratched the cheek of our dreamy protagonist. Chihara apologized, but Kuroki took it well because his cheeks were soft. Then the girl, without hesitation, said she wanted to see Kuroki even outside of school days. And with her dazzling red eyes, now accompanied by cute bows, she asked if our boy would be free during a holiday. The bead of sweat rolled down Kuroki's forehead as he seemed stuck trying to answer her. He started to stammer as if he had blue screened, and he looked so dumb, he didn't even remember the meaning of the word holiday. And Chihara waited with her piercing gaze while Kuroki couldn't believe he was being asked out. Chihara had invited Kuroki to go out during the holiday, and the clock showed it was almost time. For Kuroki, it still hadn't sunk in, and the boy thought he was entering some kind of alternate reality. He knew he shouldn't be so nervous since it wasn't exactly a date, but imagining that his priorities and routine had suddenly changed because of this day made him reflect on how different it was to see Chihara outside of school, and the usual resistance to change that psychology explains made our boy even hope it was all just a prank and he could go home happily with his usual frustration. But it was real, and Chihara arrived to meet him wearing a really cute pair of shoes. And looking very adorable in her discreet outfit, the girl apologized for being late. Kuroki tried to be polite and said he had only just arrived too. He was enchanted by Chihara and became worried about how he would walk beside such a well-dressed girl. And thinking about his low self-esteem, Kuroki figured it wouldn't be a problem because he was always overshadowed by others anyway. To ease the tension, our boy asked how she got there, and the girl, relaxed, said she had come by train. Then Kuroki said they should get going, but Chihara didn't seem to have prepared anything special. And the boy decided to ask where they were going, and Chihara didn't know what to say. The girl widened her eyes when she realized she hadn't planned anything, and Kuroki tried to improvise by inviting her for a little walk. They decided to go to a cafe, but the place was closed due to veterinary reasons. And after reading the notice, Kuroki figured it could only be a punishment from the god of planning for not having planned anything. He tried to take control of the situation by suggesting they go somewhere else, and Chihara followed him in silence. They stopped in front of the movie theater, and Kuroki nervously suggested watching a movie. They went to buy tickets, but the available seats were too far apart, so they decided to change plans. They tried a restaurant and another cafe, but all the places had huge lines. While they kept looking for something to do, Kuroki felt he had underestimated how crowded places get during a holiday. Then suddenly, Chihara grabbed the boy's shoulder tightly, almost pushing him forward. Startled, Kuroki looked back, asking what had happened, and to make the day more interesting, Chihara's shoe had come apart. The girl said it broke while they were walking, so they decided to find a place where she could sit down. They walked to the park, and Chihara sat down while Kuroki stepped away to solve the shoe problem. She stayed there waiting, and even with her blank expression, it was clear how frustrated she was with her first date. After a while, Kuroki came back with a bag but couldn't find Chihara. He saw her shoes on the ground, so she couldn't have gone far. Kuroki looked at the playground shaped like a little house with a slide and imagined the girl might be inside. He called her and heard her voice come from inside the playground, apologizing. Chihara felt guilty for not having planned anything and figured the day wasn't fun for Kuroki. So hidden inside the play structure with her face between her arms, Chihara said she was sad and couldn't go home like that. But she heard Kuroki say it hadn't been her fault after all, he hadn't done anything either. And very sincerely, the boy said he was really happy that she invited him out and kindly asked her to come out on the playground. But she was sitting right at the end of the slide, and when he noticed her, he said he had bought some shoes. Then very sweetly, Kuroki put the kitty's sandals on Chihara's feet. The boy tried to explain that he looked for something she might like but wouldn't mind if she threw them away once she got home. And for the first time, Chihara gave a sincere and radiant smile. Kuroki was even startled, but thanked God that she smiled, and in a better mood, Chihara suggested they buy some strawberry sweets before heading home. They then left the park with Chihara super comfortable in her orthopedic kitty sandals. The school routine had returned, and Kuroki was quite satisfied with his weekend, even though it had been a little messy. He couldn't stop thinking about his date with Chihara and how beautiful her smile was. A different feeling for our boy, who felt like he had returned from an unforgettable vacation. Remembering her smile, Kuroki realized it was the first time he had seen her smile and wondered if she would do it again. And there, absorbed in thought, he wondered when the next time would be, but quickly tried to stop himself from wishing for that kind of thing. The school bell rang, and while packing up his things, Kuroki wondered if it had all just been a dream. Then Chihara approached, calling him to walk home together. As they walked, Kuroki wanted to ask about the date but was afraid it really had been a dream, and that Chihara would think he was crazy. They reached Chihara's house, and the boy felt like he was walking on clouds. He sat in front of Chihara and kept repeating that he didn't mind with a silly look on his face, when suddenly he snapped out of a sort of trance, asking where he was, and Chihara told him they were at her house. Kuroki felt dazed, trying to remember how he ended up there, and Chihara explained that she had invited him for tea. Kuroki then blushed, remembering the last awkward time they had been at the cafe. He thanked her for the invitation, and Chihara told him it was the cafe her father ran as a hobby, and that it was closed at the moment because he had gone out. Kuroki got worried and asked if it wouldn't be a problem if the old man caught the two of them there alone. In truth, he wouldn't even know how to act if he ran into her father. Chihara said it wasn't a problem and decided to make some coffee for the two of them. Kuroki kept watching and found it interesting that she ground her own beans, deducing that she had learned it from her father. Chihara then brewed the coffee and served it hot in a porcelain cup. Kuroki was happy because he wasn't used to drinking coffee like that, and in front of Chihara said he would give it a try. Polite as ever, he said it smelled good, though in truth he couldn't smell a thing. He thought he might have a stuffy nose, but hid it by smiling at the girl who awaited his first sip. And when he felt the coffee touch his lips, everything started to fade away. The liquid went down his throat, and the boy found himself in an open field with baboons arguing over something important. Then the hot coffee reached his stomach, and a flying saucer appeared to calm the baboons' fight. Kuroki looked at Chihara and told her that her coffee had taken him to another world, and the curious girl asked if that was a good thing. Kuroki replied that he would keep drinking it, and Chihara was pleased because she had made the coffee based on her intuition. Chihara wanted the coffee to be an apology for the holiday. The girl then got up from behind the counter and walked away, leaving Kuroki puzzled, thinking she was going to leave. But in reality, she just walked around the counter and to his surprise sat next to him. Kuroki got nervous when she got close like that, but Chihara didn't seem to mind and then told Kuroki that she wanted it again. And with her coat over her mouth like a kitten licking its paw, Chihara revealed that she wanted to go out with him again, because if they stopped there, she would feel lonely. Kuroki blushed and replied that it was fine if it wasn't a problem for her, and then he thought their date wasn't just a dream. After Kuroki left, Chihara welcomed her father, who thanked her and asked what she had done. Chihara then said she had prepared coffee for a friend who had been there with her. The man decided to try his daughter's coffee but spat it out, clearly disapproving of the result. Kuroki liked to use the bathroom on the top floor because it was usually emptier, and he reflected for a moment that he only used any bathroom when Chihara was waiting for him. Then suddenly a trio of upperclassmen who looked more like WWE wrestlers entered the bathroom with stern faces. They asked if he was Kuroki, and of course, Kuroki, very nervous, replied that he was Kuroki. Then they ordered Kuroki to leave the bathroom. And suddenly another brute with flowing hair appeared and also mysteriously called for Kuroki. Our boy was stunned when he realized that Hibiya, his childhood friend, was at the school. The boy seemed confused and wanted to know why he was there and who those upperclassmen were, who now didn't seem to be a threat anymore. Hibiya then confidently replied that he had defeated them with punches and kicks, but Kuroki wanted to know who they were, not how they were defeated. The two started walking, and even though he knew his friend was defending himself, Kuroki questioned why he didn't just wait instead of beating up the guys. Without understanding, Hibiya put his hand on his chin and justified that he just wanted to play with Kuroki. Our boy invited his friend to come to his classroom, and Hibiya agreed, but he had a feeling someone was following them. In the classroom, another boy not seen before was surrounded by girls who were excited by his good looks. It was Kazami, another friend of Kuroki, who had decided to visit him at school and was happy when he saw him enter the room. The handsome young man walked over to greet him, but Hibiya, like a bodyguard, didn't let him get close to Kuroki. Each in their own style, the two friends seemed to compete to see who would sit closer to Kuroki, and the boy didn't know how to act with so much unwanted attention. The students were curious because Kuroki wasn't popular enough to hang out with such flashy boys, and Chihara, when she entered the room, might have been the most surprised student of all. The two friends didn't get along, and it seemed like an unfortunate coincidence that they both decided to visit Kuroki on the same day. The girl approached Kuroki asking if she should call the teacher, but the boy seemed to already know about their rivalry and preferred to wait and see what would happen. Hibiya went on the offensive and harshly told Kazami that he was much more of a friend to Kuroki, and Kazami, with his disingenuous expression, said only the strong guy thought that. Hibiya, to prove the level of their friendship, made a point of reminding them that he used to sleep on Kuroki's right side at daycare. But Kazami didn't want to be left behind and reminded him that he was also there on the left side. Hibiya then got furious, believing he was much more important after all. Kuroki was right-handed. Our protagonist didn't know how to hold back his friends and could only watch them insult each other. Chihara seemed nervous and wanted to call out to Kuroki, but when she finally tried, the other students panicked. Everyone was on edge because a big equation was forming in their minds. And what would be the result of the formula between a strong guy, a polite one, a dangerous girl, and a Kuroki? The bell rang, and the fight for Kuroki's attention was still so intense that not even King Solomon would know who to give the child to. And Chihara didn't seem pleased with this unusual day at school. Our girl then turned to her psychological support and texted Chinatsu, asking her to suggest something more friendly than a sleepover. And to her surprise, her friend replied in all caps, "None." Suddenly, the school principal showed up furious, wanted to know what was going on, and ordered Chihara not to go back behind the curtains. Kuroki entered the classroom remembering the mess his friends had caused the day before, and when he placed his backpack on his desk, he noticed that Chihara was already there. Kuroki was startled to see so many vacation magazines on the girl's desk, and he concluded that she really liked reading that kind of magazine. But as they exchanged glances from the corners of their eyes, the boy thought Chihara didn't seem like the type who traveled much, so he decided to say good morning to the girl, who didn't take her eyes off him. Chihara suddenly asked Kuroki if he would like to travel abroad during the holidays, and Kuroki didn't know what to say. Chinatsu was sipping something through a straw while trying to understand why Chihara wanted to sleep with the boy she had mentioned earlier. And reviewing things with her friend, Chinatsu realized that the appearance of Kuroki's friends had put Chihara's friendship with him at risk. Chihara then explained, worried that sleeping with him would make her his best friend, but didn't specify that his childhood friends had slept next to Kuroki at daycare. Chinatsu became curious, trying to understand her friend's behavior, and seeing her cross the line excited her. She concluded that her friend was very jealous, but Chihara just wanted to find interesting places like Joza meetups to go out with Kuroki. Chinatsu wondered how the boy would react to an invitation to sleep with Chihara, and decided that being a normal guy, he would definitely turn it down. But Chihara innocently was looking at a catalog of holiday programs while the sadistic Chinatsu wanted to closely follow this situation. Determined, Chinatsu told Chihara that she shouldn't do childish things if she wanted to sleep with the boy. And the girl seemed apprehensive when her experienced friend warned that there would be trouble if they did something they weren't used to. This information was like a bucket of cold water over Chihara's head, and she appeared devastated. And realizing her friend was thinking seriously about it, Chinatsu felt a bit bad, but knew she had to give her that reality check. But like every best friend, Chinatsu was willing to help her in the best way possible. And then she had a great idea that made Chihara curious. With a sparkle in her eyes, Chinatsu remembered that the school camping trip was coming up, and it took Chihara a while to understand. But suddenly her mind expanded with many expectations about what could happen. The teacher entered the classroom excited to talk about forming groups for the camping trip, and the phrase group formation hit Kuroki like a punch to the stomach as he didn't notice Chihara practically inviting herself with her eyes. This kind of situation didn't thrill our protagonist very much, because back in middle school, his groups were usually formed with the iconic Hibiya and Kazami. That thought made Kuroki reflect on how he was still so passive in high school, and something inside him called for change. While the teacher gave them 30 minutes to organize, Kuroki considered forming a group with Chihara, who was waiting eagerly for the invitation. But instead of inviting her, the boy rested his chin on his hand, and Chihara began to feel frustrated because he wasn't even looking at her. So the girl started approaching Kuroki, who was rehearsing in his head how to invite her. Kuroki looked so overwhelmed by not knowing what to do that he barely noticed Chihara right up in his face with his sad puppy look. The girl made a sound to get Kuroki's attention, which of course startled him, and then Chihara almost begged, "Kuroki-kun, a group." At that moment, two girls from the class showed up calling Chihara to form a camping group. Kuroki was stunned because he was about to miss the chance to invite Chihara. But before Chihara could respond to the girls, our protagonist stepped in and said she was already in his group. Kuroki's action left Chihara stunned, even though it was exactly what she wanted. And our boy was shocked for having acted on impulse, almost fainting from nervousness. He brought his hand to his mouth, punishing himself for answering in Chihara's place, but the other girl in the class seemed satisfied with the information. The girls had the idea of joining their group, and although that wasn't Chihara's plan, it didn't seem like a problem for Kuroki. The boy apologized to Chihara, who took it lightly and raised her arms as if she were about to dance the chan. But Kuroki, who didn't like chin, thought she just wanted to do a high five. Chihara widened her eyes when she felt Kuroki's touch on her hand. Then she blushed again and gave a bashful expression that even made the other girls in the room find it surprising. Breaking the mood, the student who had now joined the group organized what they would buy to make camp curry. The boy was curious and asked if Chihara had ever eaten camp curry, but she replied that she had only tried beef curry with her father. Kuroki deduced that since she lived in a cafe, it would be normal to have homemade-style beef curry. On the way to the market, our boys said they should eat chicken and pork at the camp, and Chihara listened curiously, absorbing the information. Kuroki was choosing spices on the shelf when he suddenly saw Chihara focused on another part of the market. The girl was holding a package of dumplings, and Kuroki asked if she liked them. Chihara wanted to know how he knew that, but the way she was staring at the package was enough to come to that conclusion. So Kuroki tried to please Chihara by commenting that using the dumplings in the recipe might be fun. The girl then showed excitement behind her eyes, which opened like portals at the idea of eating dumpling curry. Somewhere, Hibiya and Kazami were watching the couple, possibly jealous and curious. Kuroki was already sitting on the camp bus, hoping the vehicle wouldn't shake too much, when suddenly a student approached. The boy was about to ask to sit beside him, but Chihara appeared out of nowhere with an intimidating look hiding her fangs. She didn't need to say anything, but her expression said, "Beat it, kid." Shaking like a leaf, the boy stammered out the end of his sentence and thought it best to find another seat. With the girl now by his side, Kuroki, afraid of getting sick, asked if it was okay for him to take the window seat, and Chihara seemed fine in the aisle. The bus began to move, and our girl was serious, staring ahead, until she suddenly elbowed Kuroki in the cheek. The boy held his face, not understanding the reason for the blow. But the girl just wanted to act like a friend who playfully hits another, and it's all good. With the package in hand, Chihara asked if Kuroki wanted a sweet, but the boy warned that they couldn't eat the camp sweets yet, so Chihara informed him that she had bought extra candy. Annoyed, the boy pointed out the window, saying they could still see the school, so it was too early to start eating, but Chihara made a sad kitten pout. Not wanting to see her upset, our boy changed his mind and said it would be a good way to remember leaving school. Chihara then felt more comfortable and took out a cookie to eat. She extended her hand to Kuroki, offering him a piece, and the boy had deja vu of when she did the same with gum when they first met. Kuroki thanked her but was curious why Chihara always gave him food, and when he put the cookie in his mouth, it felt like a bolt of lightning corroding his insides. He decided to ask what kind of cookie it was, and Chihara replied that they were sardine cookies, leaving Kuroki intrigued, not knowing where she had bought them. The students arrived at the camp, and the teacher wanted to know if everything was okay. So the student replied enthusiastically, "Yes, sensei." The teacher liked the enthusiasm and assumed that the girls in that group were very energetic, while Kuroki watched him with a silly face. The student then shouted like a soldier that they were very happy. Kuroki became thoughtful about the teacher's conclusion regarding the happy girls, and with that, he noticed Chihara wasn't around. Then she appeared, and the girls got excited, admiring her apron and hair while she apologized for being late. Seeing Chihara, our boy became nervous as if it were his first time at camp. The girl then apologized to Kuroki for the delay, but our protagonist suddenly blurted out that she looked really cute in an apron. Then he felt embarrassed because she hadn't asked for his opinion, but Chihara didn't seem to mind. Kuroki asked if something had happened since she had disappeared, and she explained that she had forgotten her apron at home and went to borrow one from her friend in the other group. Chihara was sad for having forgotten the apron her father had bought, and Kuroki imagined it would have a kitten and a gyoza, but it actually had an angry dragon on it. With the ingredients on the table, they got ready to make the curry, and Chihara said she wanted to handle the onions. Kuroki agreed and handed the onion to the girl, telling her to choose how she wanted to prepare it. Chihara, thoughtful, wanted to know if she could do anything she wanted, and Kuroki, a bit worried, asked what exactly she was planning. And in her peculiar way, she answered that she just thought about crushing and frying them repeatedly, which relieved our boy since that sounded normal. With a wooden spoon in hand, Chihara said frying the onions made them better, and Kuroki figured she just wanted to brown them but warned it would take a while. Chihara looked at him like she didn't know that, but she was determined to do her best. Kuroki then decided to go do his part, and Chihara followed, observing his work. She was amazed at how easily Kuroki made cat paws. As he was cutting the carrots, he explained that everyone learned to do that with their mothers so they wouldn't cut their fingers with a knife. And he decided to show Chihara how to position the fingers, but for a moment she thought they looked like threatening claws. And she grabbed Kuroki's hand, almost breaking his fingers, and the boy turned red from the pain. Everything was going well with the curry preparation until Chihara, while stirring the onions, called Kuroki. Worried, the girl said the onions had disappeared, and Kuroki thought it was strange since onions don't just melt away. Chihara wondered if someone might have eaten the onions, but Kuroki found it odd that someone would snack on raw onions. Then the other girls in the group arrived with the rice ready, and Kuroki, standing beside a hesitant Chihara, said all that was left was to add the seasoning to the curry. Chihara half closed her eyes, feeling guilty for having eaten the onions. Then the girls decided to join in to help with the seasoning because they thought it might be fun. And as if they were a tokusatsu team, each one added an ingredient into the pot, ready to unleash the power of a giant robot. Chihara was nervous about the result, but the comments about the flavor, even without the onions, were positive. That relieved her, and Kuroki was happy to notice that the girl was too. Our boy felt embarrassed for thinking this way, but for Chihara, everything worked out because he had been a good boy. so Kuroki's worry shifted to the feeling that he had forgotten something at home. Chihara was walking through the city and a girl seemed to be spying on her from behind a pillar. This gossip was Fansawa Mobume, who was determined to find out everything about our girl's private life. Driven by her curiosity, the girl followed Chihara to understand why she was so popular and why they called her Jirei. Fansawa saw Chihara enter a store and got closer to see what she would buy. The gossip girl was shocked when she realized that Chihara was interested in red makeup. But what caught her attention the most was Chihara's unusual taste for red, flesh-colored eyeshadow. Still lurking, she was suspicious of the heavy color tone appreciated by our protagonist, not understanding what was going on in her head. She then followed Chihara to the arcade and found it curious that she went in alone, but still determined, she kept a close watch. Chihara stopped in front of a claw machine and admired the plushies behind the glass. Focused on a cute kitten, Chihara even drooled as she concentrated on capturing it. But to the school detective, our girl looked hungry, and that scared her. Chihara also liked chocolates and with skill, managed to get bar out of the machine. Fansawa had no idea she was so good at retrieving things from those machines. And watching her innocently nibble her sweet wasn't enough to silence the doubts in her mind. Chihara continued her routine calmly and entered a clothing store, with the girl still tailing her. Fansawa blushed when she saw how Chihara came out all dressed up in a look that characterized her as a Jirei. And faced with so much information, the gossip girl watched our girl walk away without understanding anything. Already at home, Chihara showed her new clothes to Chinatsu over the phone, and her friend didn't think her eccentric outfit was all that bad. Men arrived peacefully at the camp, and Kuroki was lying in his tent, relaxing and waiting for sleep to come. His conservative side made him feel embarrassed if he were seen at a pajama party, but in truth, being alone there gave him a sense of freedom he appreciated. When suddenly, a sinister shadow revealed itself outside his tent. Kuroki stared at that grim shape, imagining it was a ghost. But suddenly the ghost made a peace sign toward the boy, so it must have been a friendly little ghost. And Kuroki, startled, wondered what he should do and thought about just ignoring it. But as despair knocked at the door asking for help, our boy heard the ghost calling his name. The tent opened, and to Kuroki's relief, it was Chihara inviting herself in. Kuroki, concerned, warned the girl in case the teachers found out. But Chihara was already getting cozy, apologizing for the intrusion even as the boy explained that she couldn't be there. She simply ignored him and lay on her side, wishing him good night, which made Kuroki think she was really quite random. Kuroki warned her that the punishment would be severe, so Chihara, with her intimidating stare, told him to sleep already, but he pushed back. The couple heard footsteps outside, and the teacher opened our protagonist's tent, asking what all the noise was about. And Kuroki, who suddenly looked twice his size and was sitting like a lady, apologized and said he was going to sleep. The teacher agreed and closed the boy's tent. Then he walked away, repeating that Kuroki was just eating snacks and had grown quite a bit. Inside the tent, the boy felt relieved for having fooled the teacher, and Chihara said she would leave after Kuroki fell asleep. They stared at each other, and Kuroki felt a little awkward being alone in a tent with Chihara. Our boy lay down and stared at the ceiling while the girl did the same. After a bit of silence, Kuroki tried to ask Chihara why she was there, but the girl was already drooling in her 15th sleep cycle. And Kuroki definitely couldn't understand Chihara-san. As soon as the boy fell asleep, she opened her eyes as if she had been pretending to sleep and thanked him for allowing this best friend experience. Then Chihara left, satisfied, wanting to play again sometime, and Kuroki didn't even have to set up the tent. The morning sun rose strong, and Kuroki woke up with a bit of a stiff neck, and he was surprised that she had really gone back to her own tent. The boy kept thinking about the night before, and even realizing he'd been used and tossed aside, he wasn't mad about it. The other girls were already ready to leave, but Kuroki seemed tense about how the camp could have gone downhill after Chihara's visit. But standing there beside her, he felt good because he had actually had fun. Meanwhile, for Chihara, having slept with Kuroki at the camp was just one more task she had completed. Chihara was walking down the school hallway after class, holding a small box of contact lenses. Then she bumped into Kuroki, who asked if she wasn't going home, but the girl said she had made some plans with friends. She explained that she needed to change her contact lenses because her eyes were irritated, and Kuroki understood. They probably dried out. Then Chihara put her hand on her chin like she was organizing an idea. And just like that, she suggested Kuroki try wearing lenses too, and the boy didn't seem too fond of the idea. Chihara took a small box out of her bag, and before he knew it, Kuroki was accepting her offer. She explained that the lenses could change the color of his eyes and asked if he had ever used lenses before, but Kuroki hadn't had success when he tried. The determined girl said she would put the lenses in Kuroki's eyes herself, which to him was already going way too far. She held the boy by the chin, asking him to open his eyes wide, and Kuroki obeyed, nearly fainting like a startled goat. Then he opened his eyes wide while Chihara focused on that surgical task. And suddenly our protagonist had a lens that looked like someone had printed fingerprints on his iris. Chihara started making strange noises while looking at Kuroki, and the boy found her reaction very unusual. But not Chinatsu, who with her sixth sense knew exactly when her friend was laughing. However, to Kuroki, the only image was of the girl sprawled out on the floor, suddenly saying she needed to go. So Chihara said goodbye, blushing a little, and Kuroki was left alone in the classroom with eyes that looked like two Beale headlights. Meanwhile, Hibiya and Kazami came to visit Kuroki at school again, and the students recognized them as they walked by. Even though they couldn't stand each other, the boys were together and, as always, disagreeing about the correct way to pressure someone. As they walked, they justified to themselves that they were only there for the food, not to pressure our boy. After all, it was definitely worth crossing the city for a Taiwanese chicken steak, and Kazami seemed sure of what would happen, while Hibiya wanted to understand the plan. The boy's idea was to show the chicken to Kuroki so that he would want to come along next time. But for that to work, our protagonist's childhood friends first had to find him. And for a moment, they thought they had seen him, but doubted it because the eye color of the one walking ahead didn't match their mutual friend. Meanwhile, Kuroki didn't see them, and in fact, he couldn't see anything, just wanting to get home and undo that whole mess. At home, Chihara's father called her, asking her to buy a few things after school, and the girl grabbed a marker to write it down. But she didn't grab paper and started writing the ingredients her father wanted directly on her body. That's when the man remembered that the girl's summer uniform was still drying on the clothesline, and Chihara realized things were about to go bad. Our girl then put on her sweater to cover the notes she had written on her body for the grocery list. She said goodbye to her father, and as soon as she stepped outside, realized the heat was no joke. People were commenting on how hot it was, and the girl was sure the thermometer had hit its maximum temperature. Chihara knew everyone was staring at her, and she had never wanted so badly to get to school quickly. When she entered the classroom, Kuroki got worried because the girl was dripping like a rusty faucet. They greeted each other, and Chihara, trying not to sound crazy, commented that it was a cold day. Kuroki looked at her sideways and realized she was really not okay. To make our girl's situation worse, the teacher walked into the room and announced that the air conditioner was broken, but he had brought a flimsy fan. Kuroki didn't say anything, but he knew she was literally going to fry in that situation, and Chihara was clearly desperate. Our boy wanted to understand why she was wearing such heavy clothes, but without judging, he figured she had her reasons. She made it through the first period, was so-so in the second, and by the third she looked like a salt doll from how much she'd sweated. Kuroki became distressed and suggested that she go to the infirmary. Then the teacher, noticing the girl's condition, asked Kuroki to help her get to the nurse's office. Chihara could barely stand while they waited for the nurse. When the nurse arrived and saw the girl's condition, she diagnosed her as dehydrated. Kuroki didn't know what to do but felt sorry for his friend, and the nurse decided to go get some tea from the teacher's lounge. Our boy didn't want to interfere with Chihara's reasons, but stunned, he felt the need to ask why she didn't just take off the sweater. And Chihara, a bit embarrassed, asked if he wouldn't laugh if she told him. But she took off the sweater and revealed her body covered in scribbles, lists of vegetables and meats for the market that, in the heat, looked almost cooked. Kuroki was usually slow, but at that moment he realized Chihara might take his crown for questionable decisions. He wanted to know why she had done that, and the girl explained what had happened before she left home. Kuroki, trying to find a solution, thought about erasing the notes, but Chihara had no idea how. She always just let them fade naturally. Inspired by ideas, our prodigy boy grabbed a bottle of alcohol to remove the ink from Chihara's arm. He started rubbing it, and due to the situation, apologized for touching her, but the girl was fine with it. And since she liked to return favors, she honestly said she would do the same to him later, but Kuroki quickly said it wasn't necessary. While the boy erased the notes, he fought to contain his thoughts, overwhelmed by how special she was, and mentally scolded himself for it. But soon enough, the nurse returned with the tea, and the boy had already removed all the ink. And when everything was resolved, Chihara thought about writing the list on her phone to do the shopping after school, but Kuroki had already erased her whole body. Chihara was left speechless, and in those moments of desperation, nothing helps more than a cold tea to refresh the memory. Chihara and Kuroki seemed to be standing before a sinister portal. They were returning from the market when Kuroki asked if that tunnel had always been there, but Chihara unhelpfully mentioned that she was just waiting for a monster to come out of it. A chilling wind blew from the tunnel, and seeing the boy's fear, Chihara said he could close his eyes until they reached the other side if he wanted. Chihara was very confident in her sense of direction, and even though it was the first time Kuroki had heard something like that, he decided to trust the girl. So they entered the tunnel, unaware of what awaited them inside. Kuroki closed his eyes as Chihara had asked, but he wasn't sure if that would make it any less scary, so he decided to ask if she was still there. And the girl in the darkness replied that she was and continued walking straight. Our boy heard a noise and wondered if it was just the wind, and then felt Chihara's hand intertwining with his. Kuroki even called out to the girl, but a voice in the darkness whispered as it guided him out. The hands let go, and Kuroki thanked for the help, asking if they had already exited, while Chihara, with a frightened look, confirmed with a grunt. When he opened his eyes, Kuroki was pale, while Chihara concluded it had been a quick passage. As they continued on, Kuroki thanked the girl for guiding him through the tunnel, so she stopped and looked back, somewhat distressed. And she revealed that she hadn't even touched Kuroki's fingers while they were crossing that hole. So amid the doubts about what could have happened, the couple decided to go eat at the park, which had lots of dogs. In front of the door with the sign bearing our protagonist's name, Chihara made an unusual request. She wanted to spend the night with Kuroki, and obviously, with a frightened look on his face, our boy wants to explain how this story began. Chihara was walking next to Kuroki and thanked him for accompanying her to the market, and our boy still thought she might feel bad being with him. But she was very happy, especially because she found the limited edition plush kitten. Kuroki, looking up at the sky, felt they had walked a lot when suddenly a heavy rain started to fall. While they looked for shelter, the boy, who hadn't expected the weather to change, commented to Chihara that the forecast hadn't mentioned it. He apologized to the girl for not bringing an umbrella, but she had also forgotten, so Kuroki had an idea. He said his house was nearby and they could go there to grab an umbrella since his parents weren't home. However, he realized that sentence had come out sounding a bit strange. Even though his intentions were good, since Chihara's house was far, Kuroki felt embarrassed by how he had phrased things. Instantly, Kuroki covered his mouth with his hand, as if not wanting to even reveal his own thoughts. But Chihara, despite being surprised by the invitation, seemed quite happy with the idea. And she preferred to ask if he was really sure about inviting her, and seeing that she didn't mind, Kuroki suggested they take the underground passage. They arrived at Kuroki's house and with mutual politeness entered the place. Chihara stood for a few seconds and immediately asked where our lucky boy's room was, but Kuroki thought staying in the living room would be better. And Chihara, with a sharp sense for finding bedrooms, figured it out herself just by looking in that direction. Near the kitchen, Kuroki was very hospitable, letting the girl sit wherever she liked. But Chihara became curious about Kuroki's scent on the pillows and decided to sit on the couch while the boy offered to wash and dry her socks. Chihara thought it was a good option as long as it wasn't too much trouble for him, so she agreed to let him do it. Looking out the window, Kuroki realized the rain wouldn't stop anytime soon and showed concern for Chihara. He told the girl she could feel free to take an umbrella, but Chihara didn't seem willing to face the storm. Then, with a pitiful and homeless look, she asked to spend the night with Kuroki. Kuroki widened his eyes, trying to find the words to respond to the sugar-sweet girl. But his mind could only form bizarre scenarios about the possibility of her sleeping over, even imagining a pillow fight. What he replied sensibly was that he couldn't know much about the weather, so it might be wise not to rule out the umbrella idea. Chihara thought that was inelegant but had no choice and started imagining he would soon throw her out of his house like a stray cat. But luckily for our boy, the rain stopped and he felt relieved, though the same couldn't be said for Chihara-san. The girl made a sad face, revealing she didn't feel like going home, and Kuroki even stubbed his toe in surprise. He tried to play it off as if he hadn't understood what she had said. And in the end, the sun didn't help Chihara's plans much, so she said goodbye to Kuroki, making it clear she would come back another time. The next day at school, Kuroki met Chihara and returned her socks, and by the rules she was now free. No wait, that's another story. Summer vacation was approaching and Chinatsu was excited and curious about Chihara's plans, who had already made a list of what she wanted to do. Chinatsu was always surprised by how seriously her friend took things. But for our girl, a list of things to do with Kuroki really had to be quite specific. Even so, Chinatsu leaned over the table, eager to know everything about that list. So Chihara, without any hesitation, showed her friend that the first item would be going out at night with our protagonist. She said she would like to go to festivals and watch fireworks with Kuroki, but for Chinatsu, going out at night with a boy had a different meaning. And Chihara, although curious, understood that the options already fit as summer night activities, and her friend chose to abstain. The girl continued listing the possibilities she had envisioned for going out with Kuroki, but for Chinatsu, who listened attentively, it would be difficult since he was such a deadbeat. That deduction hit Chihara like a bolt of lightning, but still, those were the choices she made, so Chinatsu warned her to talk to the boy about her plans. At the roadside restaurant, Kazemi seemed happy to see Kuroki, and the three childhood friends talked about their summer vacation. Hibiya, with his serious expression, wanted to know our protagonist's plans while Kazami bragged about skipping summer classes, thinking he didn't need extra help. The boys began making plans for the vacation, and not wanting to join that conversation, Kuroki decided to go to the bathroom. However, he forgot his phone on the table and it vibrated with a message just as he had left. Kazemi picked up Kuroki's phone and was a bit surprised by what he read, while Hibiya complained about the size of his sandwich. A message from Chihara appeared on the phone screen, and Kazami showed great curiosity about his friend receiving something from a girl. Given the situation, Kazemi tried to calm Hibiya by asking what was on his mind, and quite seriously, the strong friend only thought about the gym, which made sense to the other. When Kuroki returned, Kazemi looked at him with a cynical expression, and our boy wanted to understand why his friend was holding his phone. Meanwhile, Chihara looked at her phone, and Chinatsu, curious, wanted to know what the boy had replied, but judging by our girl's face, something hadn't gone as planned. With the phone in hand, Chihara read the reply where Kuroki said he would date 28 girls and then go to the gym. The message left Chihara in disbelief, as if she had taken a punch and traveled to another planet. She told Chinatsu what was written and literally imagined Kuroki as a buff guy surrounded by girls at the beach, but to her friend, he really just wanted to see the ocean. Chinatsu, noticing her friend's reaction, speculated that someone might have taken Kuroki's phone, but Chihara was too naive to think about that, So her friend explained that our boy wasn't exactly the masculine type at this point. And without being much help, the more experienced friend began to say that summer vacation can change people, concluding that if he got buff, he'd have dates with other girls. And this information didn't seem to create good expectations in Chihara. She wouldn't know how to deal with her frustration at the end of the vacation if she didn't fulfill the goals on the list she had organized. On the other hand, Kuroki was outraged with his friends after discovering what they had done. Taking a serious stance despite his usual awkwardness, he warned them that even as friends they couldn't act like that. But the boy's real concern was who exactly was Chihara. It was raining heavily on the third day of vacation, and Kuroki, restless in his bed, kept wondering what to do with such bad weather. He got up and went to the window, with no hope that the storm would ease up. Then something outside caught our boy's attention. Chihara-san was standing on the street in front of his door, all dressed up with the rain pouring down on her. She looked up and with a hopeful air saw Kuroki at the window, who seemed not to believe what he was seeing. Kuroki went down and out to the street to meet her with an umbrella, asking what she was doing there, and our soap girl replied that she wanted to spend some time with him. A little embarrassed, Chihara explained that Kuroki had said she could visit him whenever she wanted, but our protagonist hadn't expected it to be so sudden. So, not wanting to leave her soaked since she had no umbrella, Kuroki invited her into his house. When they went upstairs, Kuroki's little sister appeared in the living room, and upon seeing Chihara all disheveled, was left perplexed. The little girl froze, imagining she had seen a ghost, and immediately locked herself in her room under the blankets. Kuroki returned with a towel for Chihara and found the silence in the house strange, even with his little sister nearby. So he asked the girl to dry off so she wouldn't get sick. And he was startled by the impure thoughts that affected his manliness about Chihara changing clothes in his house. But with no time to dwell on such things, our polite boy offered her some clothes until Chihara's dried. To Kuroki's surprise, she quickly replied that she would go change, and so he pointed out where the wardrobe was. The girl put on a tracksuit of Kuroki's, and it didn't look too bad on her. The two sat on the couch but remained silent, and that bothered them. Kuroki felt pressured for not being able to start a conversation, so Chihara decided to speak up. The girl wanted to know what Kuroki was going to do during the summer vacation, but he hadn't planned anything. So she smiled, satisfied with his answer. And thinking about the smile she gave, Kuroki felt his face blush when she asked if he had swim trunks. The boy replied that he did and froze when Chihara mentioned she wanted to take him somewhere. Composing himself, Kuroki said he had one but wanted to know exactly where they were going. And with a mysterious look, Chihara whispered that it was a secret, which made Kuroki think our girl was quite bold. Then he kept mulling over it, as if trying to fit pieces of a puzzle, wondering what Chihara was trying to plan. And he felt flustered and special upon realizing she was inviting him again. Chihara wanted to do something, and Kuroki suggested a little game, clearly thinking about inviting his little sister to join. But the girl was in full ninja mode and, like an exorcist, angrily ordered Chihara, "Go away, demon." Kuroki sat watching the place Chihara had chosen for their outing, a water park where families of all kinds were enjoying themselves as best they could. But he didn't seem very comfortable being in the pool, and thinking about it, he hadn't imagined Chihara to be the type who enjoyed this kind of activity. But when she arrived, Kuroki realized it could actually be fun. Chihara was wearing a very exotic swimsuit and looked at Kuroki, waiting for his reaction. However, he blushed and asked her to cover the front part of her outfit, but she just wanted a compliment from our lucky boy, who didn't respond. So Chihara insisted on asking about her beauty, since that seemed important to her. Trying to dodge the question, our boy replied that he didn't know much about fashion, but she explained that she had dressed up for him, so she wanted to be complimented. However, judging by Kuroki's face, the girl thought she had said something wrong. And to try to fix the situation, he mustered the courage and said something actually sweet. "It looks better on you than on anyone else I know." Chihara gave a beautiful smile and immediately grabbed the boy's hand, calling him to play. Before going into the pool, Kuroki wanted to know if Chihara could swim, but her negative answer left a question mark in the couple's minds, since that was also true for the boy. Seeing people having fun the way they should, they decided not to take the risk. Our couple chose the shallow kids' pool, and Chihara, comfortably sitting on her float, made a little joke about the pool's depth and the boy's height. Since Kuroki has a bit of a slow thought process, he kept trying to figure out what she meant. And to snap him out of it, he got a splash of water in the face with no time to dodge. Chihara enjoyed the game and laughed so genuinely that her canines showed. While drying his face, Kuroki noticed that Chihara was having fun with him, and that made him feel grateful. Then suddenly a little girl hung onto Chihara's float and seemed very interested in it. But from the look Chihara gave the girl, she didn't seem willing to negotiate. She explained that she would drown without the float, but Kuroki assured her that wouldn't happen. So she handed the float to the little girl, who left all happy. And even though the water didn't go past their knees, Chihara was frightened. That's why she suddenly slipped and started drowning, which scared Kuroki. But she quickly grabbed the boy's hand and stood up. The two looked at each other, and once again, Kuroki felt intimidated by the girl's enigmatic gaze. Chihara then ordered him to be her float, since he had encouraged her to give hers to the little one. And so he held her hands while she floated in the water, even though she could easily touch the bottom of the pool. Already sitting and drinking some juice, Kuroki asked why she had chosen a pool, and Chihara replied that she loved swimming even though she didn't know how. She recalled that her main experience with pools was taking photos with Chinatsu to post on Instagram, and she still thought the place was fun, which made her want to share that feeling beside Kuroki, who was now listening and beginning to understand why. But Chihara wanted to know if she was saying something strange again, and even though Kuroki thought so, he chose to omit it, simply replying that he understood what she was saying. Then she stood up and quite randomly asked Kuroki to splash some water on her body. Kuroki didn't understand the girl's request, and she explained that he had splashed her earlier, so now it was time to return the favor. The boy then made a cannon with his hand and splashed water on Chihara in the most unenthusiastic way possible, and surprisingly, the girl's eyes sparkled with the new experience. But Kuroki found it strange when she asked him to teach her how to do it the same way, referring to herself in the third person. Kuroki placed his phone on the bed and lay down beside it, remembering how fun the previous day at the pool had been with Chihara-san. He started thinking about the idea of considering what happened to date, but he quickly scolded himself, realizing what mattered were the moments of a fun day until his phone rang, and obviously, it was Chihara. Kuroki read the message asking how he was, and he assumed the girl was bored, so he thought about replying with something that didn't sound too dumb. The boy remembered that Chihara had eaten an ice cream after their outing and wondered how her stomach was doing. Then Chihara sent a picture wearing a mask because she had caught a cold. Kuroki was on his way to Chihara's house with a box in hand, wondering what one should bring to a sick person. After all, he had only ever taken care of his little sister. But thinking about Chihara's peculiarities, the comparison was somewhat valid for our boy. Just before that moment, the boy had spoken to Chihara on the phone and found out she was home alone with a high fever. So he concluded it would be wrong to leave her helpless and headed to her house. Walking to the place, Kuroki memorized the information about a button near the back door and managed to find it easily. He rang the intercom thinking of leaving what he brought and running off, but the girl opened the door so fast, it was as if she had been glued there waiting. Our boy got nervous and thought about leaving when she said she was fine, but the thermometer reading nearly 40 degrees didn't suggest a stable condition. Chihara didn't want Kuroki to go away, so she suggested they play video games, but the boy thought what she really needed was rest. So Kuroki thought it over and decided to prepare something for her to eat in the microwave. The boy noticed there was a bowl in the appliance and asked what she usually ate when she had a cold, imagining that was usually her dad's job. Chihara, looking worn out, replied that she hardly ever got sick, and for some reason, Kuroki remembered the first day of school with her giving him a sideways glance. Then with a bowl of udon, he approached the girl, saying it was nice and warm. The sick girl with the cutest face asked him to blow on it, and Kuroki concluded that she was definitely a child. And like a child, she kept repeating and jumping for him to blow the food, but Kuroki felt a bit embarrassed by the situation. Kuroki had a sense this was something a boyfriend would do, but still, he blew on the girl's food. Then carefully, he brought the chopsticks to the young girl and fed her. Chihara chewed eagerly, and with her mouth full, said it was delicious. The girl liked it so much that, insatiably, she asked him to keep going, and Kuroki hadn't imagined he'd be doing it until she was finished. Chinatsu was talking to Chihara on the phone and once again showed she was willing to help her with an outfit for a new date. So as soon as Chihara hung up the phone, Chinatsu appeared as if she had used teleportation. Always excited, Chinatsu picked out an extravagant look for her friend. But Chihara didn't seem happy about wearing that many layers in the summer. Even for her, it was obvious that dressing all in black would make her die from the heat. But Chinatsu didn't quite believe she was feeling that hot. She said she had never seen her friend sweat, but Chihara made sure to correct her and explained that even her makeup melted around her nose. So Chinatsu was unsure of what to do with the girl, but then she was happy with the solution she came up with. And when Chihara finally met up with Kuroki, the boy found it interesting that she could also dress more simply. Kuroki was waiting for Chihara for another date on that summer break, and incredulous at how consistent their outings were, he felt happy. The girl arrived in her usual jure style, and the boy, curious, wanted to know the plans for that relatively early day. Then Chihara showed a ticket that said, high-speed bus. Inside the speeding bus, Kuroki was curious about where they were going, and Chihara very casually answered that they were going camping. Kuroki seemed surprised, but the girl added that they were going to a luxury campsite where everything was already set up. Kuroki found the brochure interesting, showing tents like hotel rooms, and Chihara agreed, even though she didn't fully enjoy the space. Then the boy got curious about something and decided to ask our sweet girl with unusual choices. He thought Chihara wasn't wearing the right clothes for a day of camping. So Chihara concluded that choosing a frilly dress might have just been a navigation error. But for Kuroki, that wasn't a problem, and so they continued the trip as normal. They arrived at the destination, and our boy was delighted by the quality of the place. Kuroki got excited about a hammock, but Chihara didn't know how to use it, so he went to teach her but ended up doing it differently. And to make things worse, he tried to explain to Chihara that it wasn't the proper way to use the hammock, but she copied him anyway. Kuroki seemed to be enjoying the trip, and something made him curious. He wanted to know why Chihara decided to go camping in the middle of nowhere, and with her head sticking out in the tent. She replied that she had fun on the school trip. The girl thought the camping experience was interesting, and in her methodical way with research and notes, she showed the little schedule she had made. The place had everything available, so Chihara separated the ingredients to cook a varied lunch with meats and vegetables. They put the food on the grill and gradually began sampling the sides. Chihara ate everything she could, and Kuroki was kind of shocked at the hunger of 10 homeless people the girl seemed to have. Then after the meal, Chihara decided to use the hammock again, but it seems she still hadn't learned the right way. The day went on and our couple had really enjoyed their stay, until Chihara showed up wearing the orthopedic kitten sandals Kuroki had given her on their first outing. She explained that her heels made noise, so she decided to swap them, while Kuroki blushed upon realizing she was wearing those sandals but said nothing. That's why Chihara mentioned that they were very convenient for her feet. Then, quite sincerely, our girl revealed that she loved them and that they were her favorite sandals, which made Kuroki smile in a way we hadn't seen before. The girl looked at the sky as if searching for something, and Kuroki informed her the bus was almost arriving, but he noticed she seemed different. That's when Chihara revealed that she wanted to spend the night there. And with his delayed expression, Kuroki asked why. She pointed to the stars and wished that the two of them could see them. Kuroki thought about the possibility and considered it, since there would be no teachers around to stop them. And he agreed that it would be great if they could see the stars, which made her glance over at the boy. Then, snuggled up together, Kuroki asked her not to show up with bus tickets without warning again, and the girl understood the message. Chihara woke up still sleepy and went to prepare her morning breakfast when she realized it was the last portion of cereal. She decided to add yogurt to make the meal richer, but the product was expired. Still, she thought throwing it away would be a waste and mixed it in. The effect was immediate, forcing our girl to rush to the bathroom for number 2. When she finished, her stomach was still hurting, and to top it off, another pain caught her by surprise after a loud crash. Her pinky toe had kissed the edge of the cabinet, and the girl crouched down from the scrapes. But when the day started like that, Chihara had a modus operandi to help her get through it. She decided to have ice cream early, but thanks to the freezer's perfect performance, the stick was frozen solid. So the girl sat in the kitchen and decided to wait until it softened a bit. But since she had woken up earlier than usual, she ended up falling asleep. By the time she dozed off, the ice cream had melted all over the table inside the wrapper. Then she got a phone call, and only Kuroki's voice could save her spirits on that fateful summer day. Kuroki was feeling anxious, holding his phone. Lying down, he looked at Chihara's profile, thinking about the upcoming school festival. It had already been 5 days that he had been trying to invite the girl, but the truth was, he didn't know how. The boy got up and thought about how much they had seen each other in recent days, but he wasn't sure what he wanted her to be to him. Our protagonist seemed truly confused. Remembering Chihara's smile made him feel happy, and ever since they met, he had really been interested in her. But the mix of feelings that overwhelmed his heart left him unsure if what he felt was truly love. So he had the idea to search online for the signs of love. And the best result he found was the peace of being with a person, which made sense to him since he couldn't stop looking at her. Looking at the girl's profile on his phone, he imagined how he would react if she were close to other guys. And that didn't sit well in his stomach. Even knowing that her being pretty and fun was naturally bound to attract people, he felt jealous and guilty for imagining such things. Unable to turn off his mind, Kuroki listed the pros and cons of Chihara, which actually made him worried. So he buried his face in his pillow, unable to bear the idea of being the only one who understood her. But reflecting on that condition, he realized that's exactly what he wanted, to be the only one who understands her. And hugging his pillow, he came to the conclusion that if that were the case, he needed to take action, and searching for ways to overcome his anxiety, our boy decided he would resolve the problem. Kuroki knew he wanted to spend more time with her, and that certainty gave him the strength to turn his fear into courage. So he picked up his phone and began dialing his beloved. Even nervous, he couldn't hesitate. Not now. Each ring of the call was a heavy heartbeat that slowed time, and the boy tried to stay calm. Chihara heard the phone ring, and when she answered, our boy greeted her brightly. But for a few seconds, he was at a loss for words and introduced himself so formally it sounded like he was applying for a job. Chihara listened attentively as he asked if she was free, and the girl replied yes. Then Kuroki was caught off guard when she said she was happy he had called. And taking that as the perfect cue, Kuroki managed to invite her out even if it made his cheeks go red. The boy was sweating as he held the phone, while Chihara sounded a bit incredulous on the other end about the invitation. And holding ice cream that had melted in its wrapper, the girl listened to him talk about the upcoming school festival. And Kuroki listened as she shared an unlucky experience at the Hatsumon of the last festival, which made him wonder if it was a bad idea to invite her to the school event. But being polite and staying on topic, the protagonist insisted on fulfilling his goal. Kuroki seemed choked up because his mind showed him the way, but the words wouldn't come out. And suddenly, with strength and determination, he managed to invite her on a date. Then he got startled by his own words, because asking someone out is very different from inviting them on a date. But hey, he did pretty well. On the day of the festival, Kuroki arrived accompanied by his doubts about how he had invited Chihara to the event. And standing before the temple where the celebration would take place, the feeling was different, even though he had been there before, because this year, he'd have Chihara-san by his side. Our boy was intrigued while he waited, mixing the emotions of anxiety and excitement. And as he compared the date to facing a video game boss, he heard his name being called. Chihara had just arrived in a basic style, and as always when they met, Kuroki didn't know what to say. So the first thing that came to mind was how hot the day was, and Chihara agreed. But right after, she looked at the sky and explained that she wore the sweatshirt because it was cold earlier. Then Kuroki felt his face blush as Chihara wanted to confirm that this wasn't just a regular outing, but literally a date. And Kuroki, though stammering, replied that yes, it was. The two walked for a bit, and Kuroki thought about getting something to eat. But Chihara was staring into the distance as if she wasn't listening to what he said. Then the boy realized she was looking intently at some ladies wearing yukata. And Chihara seemed frustrated for not bringing hers, so Kuroki commented that she would probably look great in one. But he quickly scolded himself, thinking he could have said something better. Frustrated, Chihara said she would wear a yukata next year, which made Kuroki wonder if she would go to the festival with him the following year. Suddenly, Chihara looked startled and asked if Kuroki was going to transfer schools, but the boy replied confidently that he wasn't. Then, watching the people walking around, Chihara wanted to know what the boy liked doing at festivals. And Kuroki revealed that he usually bought bouncy balls and yo-yos for his little sister, which made Chihara think he was a great brother. The girl, for her part, had visited the festival when she was in elementary school, and Kuroki, noticing her serious demeanor, wondered if maybe she didn't really like festivals. Then the girl pointed to a stall and asked if Kuroki could get a yo-yo for her. Kuroki, a bit awkward, replied that he could and went over there through the crowd at the event. He came back with a toy, and Chihara seemed to enjoy herself while playing with the yo-yo. Kuroki also picked up some treats and suggested they look for a place to sit and eat. When suddenly the rain began to fall, determined to ruin the couple's outing. The boy could barely keep his eyes open due to the heavy raindrops falling from the sky when he felt Chihara's hand on him. She intertwined her fingers with his, and they stood there looking at each other as the rain kissed their faces. Chihara kept looking at Kuroki for a while, which made him call her name, unsure of what was going through her mind. Then Chihara pulled Kuroki by the arms with determination and dragged him without looking back while he asked in desperation where they were going. The rain began to pour even harder, trying to get in the way of our couple's date. Sheltered under a small hut, they commented in frustration that the fireworks would probably be canceled. And there they stayed, watching the rain fall in silence until something came to mind. This time, it was Kuroki who took a chance and started a conversation, complimenting Chihara for having found that shelter from the bad weather. The girl explained that it was pure luck that she found the hidden spot by walking in the opposite direction from the others. And Kuroki grew curious about the girl's sense of direction that brought them there without hesitation, which made our protagonist thank her, since he almost panicked, and Chihara commented that she had noticed the boy's desperation. The boy then went quiet and with his head down, apologized, but Chihara didn't understand why. Looking at his own hands, Kuroki only said it was strange, but he felt bad. Without looking at her, Kuroki's thoughts betrayed him with the idea that he had brought bad luck to the date, as if it was a waste of her time to be with him. Noticing the boy's mood, Chihara took off her coat and, even sad about the festival, revealed that she had fun being there with him. She then draped the coat over Kuroki's shoulders, as if comforting him, and said she liked the date while they looked at each other. Our protagonist didn't know how to repay such cuteness, and Chihara simply told him not to worry. Then he blushed and began to stammer nervously. Kuroki asked if Chihara would be cold without the coat, but she had the idea that they could take turns wearing it, adding that the temperature felt just fine to her. Faced with the situation, the boy gathered strength to rehearse a few words. Then, wrapped in Chihara's warm coat, he said that regardless of the festival, being with her was what really mattered. Chihara widened her eyes at the boy's confession, as he thanked her for accepting the invitation. And Chihara's expression gradually turned into a serene and genuine smile. She pulled a skewer from her bag and said they still hadn't eaten, and so they had their meal until the rain passed. When the weather improved, they headed to the train station, talking about how the rain got in the way, but how good it felt once it was gone. And Kuroki said he checked the weather forecast for their next date, looking at the girl, ready to say goodbye. Chihara then held the back of Kuroki's neck and brought her face close, giving him a soft kiss on the forehead. She looked into his eyes and told the boy that she considered this outing a real date. Kuroki stared at her, stunned, but couldn't say anything besides goodbye. He watched her walk away, frozen, as if every fiber of his body had been paralyzed by the kiss. Then suddenly, he collapsed forward like a drawbridge without brakes, startling the people at the station. We go back to the week before the festival when Chihara, with the phone to her ear, heard Kuroki invite her on a date. The call ended, and the word date wouldn't leave the girl's head. While eating ice cream, she kept pondering what that really meant. So she had the idea to talk to Chinatsu and sent her friend a message asking what the difference was between hanging out and going on a date. Upon reading the message, Chinatsu nearly had a meltdown, as if a lightning bolt had struck her. Then, rushing, the girl went to Chihara's house to hear the news. And she wanted more details about how the invitation had happened, and Chihara explained. Chinatsu assumed it was the guy who had a crush on Chihara and brought her hand to her mouth as if to silence her thoughts about someone actually being interested in her friend. Before anything else, Chinatsu wanted to know what Chihara understood as a date, and from the girl's childish answers, her friend realized she'd been reading too much manga. Then Chihara, showing maturity, blurted out, "Couples." And her friend was satisfied with the answer, widening her eyes and mouth like lightning had struck her head again. With her hand on her chin, Chinatsu imagined that even Chihara would understand something like that and seem happy about the idea of the date. Chihara didn't know what to say and just stared at Chinatsu. Always very patient, Chinatsu looked for the right words to explain how a date worked for our girl. So she decided to ask more directly if Chihara liked Kuroki. Chihara didn't hesitate and said that she liked him very much, which made Chinatsu blush and cover her mouth in excitement. Chihara's friend grew curious about her concept of liking, and Chihara compared it to kittens and well-made joses to explain. Chinatsu listened attentively but tried to understand the connection between those things, wishing Chihara would stop talking so she wouldn't confuse her further. And she felt relieved when Chihara paused. In the silence, Chinatsu looked at Chihara, who was drooling over joses, and concluded that she was happy and wanted to have fun with the boy who was always on her mind. Then Chihara started talking nonstop about joses again, and Chinatsu held her by the shoulders to stop her. Looking into her friend's eyes, she showed confidence that Chihara would do well no matter what. Very excited, Chinatsu wished her friend could do everything on the date, but Chihara was watching her in that way where she took everything literally, which wasn't noticed by Chinatsu, who was already thrilled imagining what the girl would wear. And since it was already late, Chihara invited her friend to stay for dinner, as her father had prepared omelette rice gyoza. On the last day of vacation, our protagonist decided to meet his childhood friends at the restaurant, and Kazami, wiping his mouth, didn't seem very pleased. Trying to come up with the right excuses, Kuroki explained that this summer he ended up doing a lot of things and didn't have time for them. Kazami wanted to test our boy and asked if he had traveled for family reasons, and Kuroki, feeling embarrassed, answered no. With that, Hibiya, in his extravagant outfit, got straight to the point very seriously and asked if Kuroki had fallen in love with someone. Our protagonist tried to dodge the question by commenting on Hibiya's clothes, but Kazami wasn't going to let him escape that easily from what really mattered. Kuroki couldn't face his friends, and Kazami, noticing his defensiveness, gave a dark look and asked if he had met a girl this summer. Then, dramatically, Kazami confiscated the fries and tearfully showed his disappointment in Kuroki for not enjoying summer with them. Our boy tried to explain, visibly concerned about his friend's condition, but Kazami, more threatening, was firm in his questioning. "Why didn't we hang out during vacation?" Cornered by his friends, Kuroki tried to find the words but failed. In the silence, Hibiya noticed Kazami's frustration, and when Kuroki said the girl was kind, the first boy also became frustrated. Kuroki put his hands together, apologizing for not being able to meet his friends during the summer. While Kazami and Hibiya listened, the boy redeemed himself by saying he considered them friends and didn't want to hurt their feelings. That was enough for Kazami, who suggested they hang out the next day, but Kuroki reminded him that classes would resume. So Kazami decided to give his friend some advice, since he had known him since childhood, or maybe even in a past life, by his calculations, which Hibiya did not approve of. Kuroki felt embarrassed about receiving advice on girls, but Kazami insisted on warning him, as his tips were more reliable, which made our protagonist feel conflicted, since he knew he liked Chihara. So he decided to open up to his friends about his romantic doubts and how to act under so much pressure in his head. That's how Kuroki gave it some thought and wished he could just be a flower, quiet, simply doing his part in photosynthesis. This revelation made Kazami and Hibiya feel better, as they realized their friend was still the same boy. And Hibiya made sure to say he was there to help him, even if it meant straightening out Chihara, which Kuroki strongly disapproved of. Kazami, more reserved, thought it would be best for our boy to go at his own pace, without rushing, since he was inexperienced in this area. So, more relaxed, he asked Kuroki if he wanted the silly advice or the serious one, but our protagonist preferred neither, something even Hibiya agreed with. Kuroki walked down the school hallway with a tired look, having spent the night receiving advice over the phone for Hibiya and Kazami. He greeted some students who said good morning to him, thinking about how hard it was to try to be charismatic. Then he remembered Kazami's advice about being positive and looking people in the eyes when greeting them. And there, in the middle of so many students, he realized he hadn't looked into the eyes of the boys he had just greeted. It had been completely automatic. But the reality is that for our boy, that had always been his way. So he started to feel like he understood how things worked as the teacher spoke about the students' suggestions for the next festival. Kuroki kept thinking about the festival assignment and wondered what he would like for that kind of event. And as always, nothing came to mind, which made him willing to agree with anything that didn't require much effort. So he put his hand to his face, knowing he wasn't the kind of boy who took initiative, and once again remembered Kazami's advice about becoming a leader. His thoughts were interrupted by someone thanking him for lending an eraser, and our boy even got 2 little chewing gums in return. Kuroki thanked them, baffled at how people could be so considerate, and he couldn't easily develop his friendly side with anyone. Our protagonist was so downcast that he didn't notice Chihara sneaking up on him. After the usual scare, he heard the girl ask what he was going to write, but the boy didn't seem very sure about it. Chihara explained that she was talking about the festival suggestions, but Kuroki didn't really care about that, while the girl seemed worried about the situation. Chihara wanted to write something fun and enjoyable for the whole class, but she didn't have the confidence to do it. And Kuroki watched as she seriously said her idea involved everyone, The boy then deduced that Chihara's concern was because her idea was for everyone, but in truth, it was a personal preference, which made her lower her head. While thinking about his own lack of confidence in deciding something for the festival, Kuroki felt like maybe that was also Chihara's problem. Then, a little desperate, the girl asked Kuroki to write it for her. But for our protagonist, this was the opportunity for people to get to know Chihara-san better. Chihara listened carefully as Kuroki explained that it was a moment to share ideas and no one would be upset because that's what they wanted. The girl became curious if Kuroki also wanted to know more about her, and our boy immediately got flustered. He looked away because Chihara, in moments like these, was always very direct. She called his name, waiting for a quick answer while he blushed. Not satisfied, Chihara cornered Kuroki against the wall until he said something, and the boy was nearly having a breakdown from so much embarrassment. In the end, he dodged the question, and Chihara decided to talk about her idea for the festival, which was a gyoza food truck with various options, something that for Kuroki would require a lot of meat. We arrived at the day of voting on what event the class would hold for the festival, and the teacher, very excited in front of Chihara and the students, announced that they would do the gyoza food truck. And our boy didn't seem surprised by the news. To understand how it happened, we go back to Kuroki standing before the ballot box for small objects. And on the blackboard, the teacher displayed the options of the gyoza truck and the haunted house while Chihara explained her project. The girl was very confident in her speech, which drew the attention of the whole class. After Chihara's words, both the class and the teacher could only think of gyoza as if the girl had implanted a chip in everyone. But for Kuroki, she had just taken advantage of the students' curiosity, who were hooked by her eloquent speech, which improved the class atmosphere with the students extremely motivated by Chihara's idea. And Kuroki felt happy because for sure, he was one of them. Chihara had good taste in dresses, which was a positive point for the girls who admired her while she spoke. And even if there was some awkwardness at first, the ice was broken when the two students who had gone camping with Chihara decided to support her. Soon, she was surrounded by several girls because our girl had that celebrity-like impact when it came to gyoza. Then Chihara waved at Kuroki, while the students decided that she would be the event leader and handle everything. The boy just watched how she had the gift of leadership, even though he suspected they were using her as the poster girl. The students figured it would be too much work for Chihara to handle the project alone, so they decided it would be better to have someone to help her. And of course, the chosen right-hand man was Kuroki, who didn't have time to respond, his eyes wide open. Chihara thanked the girl for the help and grabbed Kuroki by the shoulder to stop him from backing out while they invited him to be the vice leader. Chihara begged the boy to accept while hugging him, and Kuroki accepted, trying to understand why she was so close. Then the girls began assigning tasks, but left the main ones to Chihara and Kuroki. Our girl made it clear that she would decide everything, and the students had no objections, which made Kuroki realize just how excited Chihara really was. He kept observing the situation and found it surprising how Chihara took the lead despite her reputation, which made it all even more fun. Our protagonist then smiled, satisfied with Chihara's happiness, who called him to say something important. She looked at him, and embodying the class leader, was incisive in warning the boy that they needed to train. Kuroki was left open-mouthed, trying to understand what she meant by that. In the midst of the festival preparations, Chinatsu didn't seem very satisfied with something. The girl wondered how Chihara could have been so proactive for the festival, and she felt extremely upset because her friend didn't ask her for advice about her clothing. Chinatsu realized she was being left out but wouldn't accept it without a fight, and she remained thoughtful on the subject while helping a student shape a monster mask for their class's haunted house project. Chinatsu felt relieved because she managed to handle all those monstrous dolls that were her task for the festival. Then she could focus on what really mattered to her, Chihara's outfits. She knew the festival lasted 2 days, so she was happy thinking she could design more than one outfit for the event. That made the girl obsessed with the idea of turning Chihara into the star of the festival, impacting the elderly, youth, men, and women. Chinatsu envisioned an eccentric waitress outfit since her friend's class theme would be a restaurant. But she remembered that Chihara's class also had a Chinese theme, and that took her ideas to another level. However, like a lightning bolt in her head, she recalled that the event would be more open-ended, and she got extremely excited at the possibility of dressing Chihara however she wanted, and nothing could stop Iwakura Chinatsu from now on. Her mind bubbled with various ways to combine the most extravagant pieces possible for Chihara. And as if the girl were a doll, Chinatsu even considered doing a cosplay for Chihara, which was definitely outside the box. But she didn't care, merely aiming to transfer her disappointments into her friend's potential. Thus, she decided to go to Chihara's classroom to make or demand a proposal. However, her friend was having a training day and couldn't meet her. Kuroki was accompanying Chihara, apprehensive about what kind of training she meant, and his mind imagined something like ancient meditation. Because in his mind, the girl saw gyozas as something sacred and immaculate. And absorbed in thought, he pondered how a prayer for the gyozas would be, but concluded he would keep an open mind about the process. Then they arrived at a Chinese restaurant, and Chihara said the place belonged to someone she knew. The boy was confused about what kind of integration training this might be. Kuroki put on an apron, ready to do whatever she asked, and the girl commented that he looked like a kid on his first job. Chihara introduced the restaurant owner who would help them with the school project, and the guy immediately ordered Kuroki to give his best for the festival, which made our boy blush and fully agree. With a frying pan on the stove, the man began the gyoza lesson, but Kuroki was nervous about his first time. Noticing the boy's state, Chihara told him to relax his shoulders and focus on learning and taking it seriously. Kuroki replied that he would do his best. With an eager look, Chihara said she would eat all the gyozas our protagonist made, which made the boy even more pressured, and he asked if there was any trick to preparing the food. The handsome guy with the goatee simply replied that the work required physical intensity, showing Kuroki that Chihara was a gyoza professional. The man stirred the ingredients while Kuroki watched everything carefully. Chihara grabbed her gyozas and revealed she had learned to make them with the restaurant owner, and Kuroki thought about how she also felt pressured by a compliment. Kuroki was ready to try making his own and began working with great focus next to Chihara, showing her expertise on the subject. Chihara commented that she would like to use Chinese chives for the festival gyozas, but that could damage them. So she suggested making a large batch beforehand to freeze and have them ready for the right date. Kuroki was amazed at how she seemed to have everything already organized in her mind, and he kept watching the girl's explanations about everything. She wanted to offer it to the other students with her gyoza stall. The boy felt a mix of curiosity and apprehension about everything she said so meticulously, and when she was about to mention the final touch of her masterpiece, Kuroki interrupted her. Apologizing for his attitude, our boy suggested that they make the special type of gyoza in the morning and in the afternoon serve the skewers she had mentioned earlier. Chihara seemed stunned by the boy's comments, who appeared concerned about the quality and quantity of the meal being offered. Suddenly, Chihara interrupted Kuroki and held his hand with a goofy expression. She then frowned, and Kuroki could only stammer the girl's name, but she quickly smiled, agreeing with the boy's suggestion. Kuroki fell silent and kept staring at her until his eyes sparkled when she said she was feeling happy. And in front of the gyozas, she said that everything was being a lot of fun. She looked at the boy with her mysterious gaze, wanting to know what he thought about it. But she soon had to guide him, as her expression left him so distraught that he even messed up the recipe. Right before the festival, the entire school was mobilized in preparations. Our protagonist had caught a cold and was bedridden, which made him feel like an embarrassed idiot. Kuroki coughed a lot but was confident he would go to school the next day since his body temperature was starting to drop. Even so, he felt bad for not being able to help with the festival preparations while others were doing their part until his intercom rang. He slowly got up to answer, imagining his sister might have forgotten her keys, but was met with Chihara's voice asking, "Hey there." Chihara, on the other side, noticed from the boy's voice that he was a bit stressed, so she said she just wanted to check how he was doing. Kuroki thanked her for the visit but didn't want her to catch a cold too, though she said she wouldn't stay long. Chihara only wanted to know how high the boy's fever was, and he said it was going down while she held his shoulders. Chihara didn't seem to believe him much and got closer to his face to check, but that way he'd burn up. So she showed a little gift bag to the boy and guessed he must be hungry because of the cold. Chihara had brought some gyozas for Kuroki to try. The girl placed one of the gyozas between her chopsticks and asked him to eat it because it had healing powers, but Kuroki didn't seem very convinced. He decided to ask how the school preparations were going, and Chihara replied that everything was under control. She then said it would be disappointing if he couldn't be there, just like it would be bad if he wasn't there, and Kuroki thought it best to reply that he was never in the place she mentioned, until Kuroki's little sister arrived home calling for him. And when she came across Chihara, the little girl froze in shock as if she had seen the ghost again. So Chihara had to keep the little sister from running away, showed her palm with a gyoza, and the girl was left speechless. She called Chihara the big gyoza sister and froze when Chihara touched her face. Suddenly, the two hugged, and Kuroki's little sister snuggled into Chihara as if hypnotized. Kuroki watched his sister say that Chihara was a warm big sister, and so Chihara picked up her bag and headed to the door, carrying Kuroki's sister under her arm like a teddy bear. But in truth, she was just accompanying her big sister. After all, the school festival was very close. People started arriving at the school festival, and Kuroki wondered how his class's booth was going until the girls from the project pointed the way. The boy then came across a fully decorated food truck bearing Chihara's name and was amazed by such peculiarity. Already wearing his apron, Kuroki thought it was incredible seeing the whole crowd curious to try the gyozas. And with Chihara all dressed up, serving customers flawlessly, he could only think about how successful things were turning out. The truck was so busy that while frying the gyozas, our boy started thinking it would never be enough to serve everyone, until Chihara approached, thanking Kuroki for managing to come help with the project. She was proud that Kuroki prepared the gyozas the way she taught, and the boy revealed he had practiced at home, which made Chihara pat his head like a dog, saying he was a good boy. The girl was happy to serve the customers, but when it came to gyozas, Chihara really just wanted to cook. So she looked at Kuroki with her intimidating way and said that during break time, they would cook some gyozas together, which left our protagonist with no right to reply when suddenly something caught the couple's attention. Kuroki was worried there might be some kind of problem, and Chihara, as the project leader, said she would take a look. Then the girl came across two delinquents from another school in the food truck line, ready to stir up trouble. The brutes yelled that they were starving and wanted gyozas, and Chihara, in her own way, thanked them for staying in line. Kuroki, watching the situation from behind the truck door, was scared and unsure of what to do, imagining Chihara very angry, attacking and fighting with the two unwanted customers. But the girl was composed and seemed to understand how people behaved when they were hungry. Very diplomatic, Chihara handled the situation by asking for patience and informing the customers that they would soon taste delicious gyozas. Kuroki was amazed by the girl's skill, who even promised to take photos as if she were truly a celebrity. Chihara returned, apologizing to Kuroki for making him wait, and commented that she got grumpy when she was hungry, which made the boy think she was quite honest. The Shiggy boys were scheming a plan to return to the line after eating to get seconds, while Kuroki and Chihara also started to feel hungry. Our protagonist suggested to Chihara that they eat curry at Class C's stand when they had a moment, and somewhat embarrassed, he waited for the girl's response to his invitation for them to eat together. Chihara looked at Kuroki a bit upset because she thought the invitation was redundant since she had already decided they would hang out together during the break. And very honestly, the girl said that Kuroki was a bit insensitive sometimes, though our protagonist didn't quite understand why. As people crowded around the truck, Chihara asked if Kuroki had ever eaten curry gyoza, and the boy found it insensitive of her to take gyoza to another stand. A hand held someone by the clothes because the place was scaried with the demon's head ready to attack. Kuroki was sweating cold with panic next to Chihara as they entered the haunted house that welcomed them to hell. It was an interesting visit to the haunted house with monsters everywhere, and our couple praised the class's effort that led the project to entertain the crowd. Kuroki was walking beside Chihara and noticed that many couples were acting very intimately, which made the boy think this was the effect of the school festival. He kept wondering where these couples had been before all this, even thinking that maybe he and Chihara had caused that kind of effect on people. But snapping back to reality as he looked at Chihara, our boy tried to ignore these internal speculations, focusing only on being her event guide. And he even found comfort in thinking that way, as it would help him avoid love-struck glances that would make him run away in fear. Then Chihara pointed to a sign that caught her attention. It was a fortune-telling house, which made Kuroki uneasy, but Chihara thought it would be interesting since no one had ever predicted her future. A sign offering compatibility readings seemed attractive, and Kuroki imagined something about the influence of the stars, while Chihara only thought of something like love or friendship. So the girl took the lead and decided to enter the mysterious booth about cosmic and phenomenal powers. Unlike what they expected, a student was just reading a tarot card, and our couple remained very curious about the mystical student's evaluation. She kept analyzing the image on the card as if something extraordinary was about to happen, which made our protagonist more anxious. She slowly spoke about reciprocal feelings, which made Kuroki almost faint from nervousness. On the other hand, the idea of unrequited love made even Chihara change her rather contained expression to one of surprise. And anxiously awaiting the verdict of the mystical student, drums rolled as the girl prepared to reveal their compatibility. Suddenly, the student exclaimed extremely high, with enthusiasm, which made Chihara show her little teeth in happiness, and Kuroki put on a goofy face. He looked toward Chihara, who covered her mouth, trying to hide her excitement. Then the girl began to explain the compatibility, and Kuroki seemed very interested when she said the two were a good match. And just as she was about to drop the bomb that they were crazy, Kuroki quickly grabbed Chihara and ran out of the place with her in his arms. The mystical student was outraged because her intention was only to reveal they were crazy about each other. Far from the danger of predictions, Chihara gave some gyoza skewers to Kuroki. The boy praised the meal so much that he claimed he could eat Chihara's gyozas all day long, but the girl doubted him. Chihara said she was happy about the courage to propose the gyoza stand, and Kuroki said he also felt, for the first time, truly involved with the festival. Smiling genuinely, our boy thanked Chihara for the opportunity, and the two stared at each other for a moment in that atmosphere of gratitude and cordiality when murmurs were heard. The couple looked ahead and realized that other students were watching them like a soap opera, rooting for their first kiss. Both Chihara and Kuroki noticed their faces turning red as they searched for words to describe what they were feeling, and so they realized that this was the experience of spending the school festival with someone you truly like. Kuroki, lost in thought, ended up speaking out loud and philosophized about the desire to run free among the crowd, but this time it was Chihara who couldn't follow his reasoning. Then, snapping back to reality, the boy said it was time to return to the stand, but Chihara grabbed him by the collar. Kuroki looked at her, asking what had happened, and Chihara, with a tender expression behind her red eyes, simply said, "Don't go." Kuroki heard the girl's soft voice asking him to stay there a little longer, and our boy felt like he was floating among Saturn's rings. Back at the stand, people noticed that Kuroki seemed different as he fried gyozas as if he could travel between portals of eternity. Chihara stood in front of the mirror, and something in her reflection bothered her. Her bangs had grown quite a bit since the last time she cut them, and the one who always helped with that task was Chinatsu. But since her friend wasn't around, Chihara decided to take the scissors and trim them herself. That morning, Kuroki entered the classroom out of breath, thinking he was late, and he found it unusual that Chihara-san wasn't already in her usual seat. Suddenly, the girl also entered the classroom wearing a large cap and passed by Kuroki as if nothing had happened. The boy greeted Chihara, who looked at him a bit frustrated and decided to take off her cap. She said good morning to Kuroki, revealing her bangs, which were rather short and spiky. But our boy stared at her for a while, only sensing that Chihara was mentally shaken, without noticing her hair at all. Then he started imagining the reasons for Chihara being that way and soon assumed it might be because of him, as he always did when something was wrong. That was when Kuroki heard one of the students commenting on Chihara's new look, and the boy started looking for the change he had noticed. Kuroki looked at Chihara more carefully, trying to find out what had really changed. And while watching her talk with another student, he felt worried for not being able to identify anything that expressed such a drastic transformation in the girl. Chihara heard Kuroki call her and with a serious expression looked at him from the corner of her eyes. Kuroki seemed uncomfortable and got nervous trying to find the right words about the topic of her new look. Chihara, still wearing the long cap, stared at him, waiting for what he would say, but only heard the boy stammer. So she lifted Kuroki's chin while he struggled to say anything meaningful. Chihara brought her face close to Kuroki's and with a serious expression, intimidated him by saying that was the only way for them to make eye contact. In a very bad mood, our girls stepped back and stared at Kuroki, as if judging him for not noticing such a big change. Kuroki felt his face heat up as he began to mumble an apology, but it was only with their faces so close that he finally noticed how short her bangs really were. But soon things went back to normal and Kuroki couldn't focus in class because he kept staring at the new bun the girl had made with her tiny bangs. Another school day and Kuroki arrived late because he had taken his little sister to the hospital, and if he could, he would have skipped all the classes. Chihara, who was already in the classroom, told the boy the obvious. You're late. So he decided to ask his seatmate a question. And Chihara replied that it was no problem when Kuroki asked to see her notes from previous classes. But before that, the girl challenged him to a battle, clenching her fist. Kuroki widened his eyes but didn't feel intimidated. They stared at each other and the boy said he didn't want to beat her. But Chihara took that as boasting and didn't believe he'd be content with just losing. The mood got tense and Kuroki also clenched his fist, signaling that he had accepted the challenge while Chihara seemed to spark lightning, ready for battle. Kuroki's expression was fierce, and he wouldn't give in easily, even if Chihara was his opponent. Kuroki prepared his special move, saying he was going to launch it, which to Chihara sounded like an insult, so they swore to fight with fairness and honesty. When they threw their moves, Kuroki's hand showed rock, while Chihara's showed a mighty pair of scissors, revealing the winner of the round. Quickly, Kuroki, with fire in his eyes, pointed in the direction the girl had to look for having lost the match. But Chihara didn't seem to understand that part of the game and decided to look up, almost breaking her neck. Our boy indignantly asked if looking in that direction was part of the rules, and Chihara, still looking at the ceiling, replied that it was. They decided to play another round, and Kuroki won again with his sharp scissors that cut through Chihara's paper like silk. And abruptly, he signaled for her to look to the left. But the girl stood still as if she had been hit with a paralysis spell. Kuroki was indignant, ordering her to look in any direction, which revealed a competitive side of the boy not seen until now. Chihara was motionless, her eyes wide open as if she were entering a trance, and Kuroki called out to her, worried. Visibly embarrassed, our boy explained that if she broke the rules again, he wouldn't be able to play by indicating the direction after the move. Chihara activated her electric shock power, warning that she wouldn't mess up again. And after winning the battle this time, she ordered Kuroki to look to the left, and upset, he obeyed while complaining. Like a good loser, Kuroki said he was going to ask the teacher about the lesson content, but realized it was a bit too late to do so. Chihara turned to Kuroki when asked if she had taken notes during class, but she didn't answer and walked over to the classroom window and began to open it. Chihara ignored Kuroki, showing admiration for the flowers changing color with the season's shift. That was an unexpected meeting, and while Chinatsu seemed cordial, our Chihara simply observed Hibiya and Kazami, who had his usual smile. But Kuroki was near a sound system, and to him, things didn't seem to be going as he had imagined. This arc began when Chinatsu shouted for Chihara, calling her to go out while the girl walked beside Kuroki in the school hallway. Kuroki and Chinatsu locked eyes, and the girl let out a growl, creating a bit of tension. So our boy tried to be polite and attempted a brief hello, and Chinatsu stared at him with great curiosity. Blushing, she seemed to understand the situation, deciding that Kuroki would also go out with them, but our boy found her sudden attitude strange. Kuroki felt his face burn as he concluded that Chihara's friend was being too familiar, but to her, it wouldn't be a problem if the boy brought someone else. Our boy raised his hand, indicating he wanted to speak, and said he wasn't uncomfortable while Chihara brought her hand to her mouth. But then Kuroki had an idea that seemed appropriate for the occasion and suggested calling his friends, which was immediately accepted by Chinatsu. Thus, we return to the part where Kuroki is near the sound table, his face blushing as he nervously looks to the side. Because Hibiya didn't seem very pleased about receiving a message from Kuroki, and suddenly saw unfamiliar faces. With his unfriendly look, the boy asked sharply who the girls were, and to ease the tension, Chinatsu smiled and decided to introduce Chihara as Kuroki's friend. Of course, she also introduced herself as Chihara's friend, which made total sense to Hibiya. That's why the boy explained that friends of friends are also part of the family and decided they would all have fun together. Chinatsu excused herself and stood up for a moment while Kuroki watched her, not understanding what she was about to do. Then the girl approached our protagonist and whispered, wanting to know a bit about his friends, and Kuroki replied that he'd known them since elementary school. Chihara had a tense expression as if she couldn't move her cheeks, and Kazemi stared at her curiously, imagining she was a photograph, since Chihara hadn't moved a muscle until then. Chinatsu watched the scene with enthusiasm while Kuroki, worried, asked for help in figuring out how to deal with both at once. Chihara pouted, and when asked by Chinatsu how she was feeling, the girl seriously confirmed she was upset. Kuroki also wanted to know why Kazemi was acting that way, and the sarcastic friend just said he was surprised to be introduced last. Then Kazami revealed he had never gone out with a girl before, and Chinatsu became very interested in learning more about him. The girl asked if he was afraid of girls, but very confidently, Kazemi simply said he just wanted to make a good first impression. Chinatsu, who never acted without a purpose, became thoughtful and decided to ask Kuroki and Chihara to go get soda for everyone. The protagonists agreed and left the table, confused since Chinatsu had practically ordered them to buy soda from the first floor. Kuroki's friends were left alone with Chinatsu, who watched them like an HR interviewer. Alone with them, the girl decided to speak, and her attitude left the boys a bit stunned. But she was so excited that she rested her face on her hands and, blushing, said she wanted to ask a question. Meanwhile, Chihara said she had found the elevator, but Kuroki looked back because there was still melon soda on that floor. While our couple looked for the soda, Kuroki asked worriedly if Chihara felt uncomfortable in larger groups, and Chihara, without looking at him, reassured him, saying everything was fine. Kuroki looked at her, unconvinced, and Chihara decided to keep talking. The girl then looked Kuroki in the eye and asked him in a vulnerable tone not to leave her alone. Our boy blushed for a moment and handed Chihara her drink, which looked more like a steaming tea called plum kombucha. Without further delay, Chinatsu got straight to the point and asked the boys bluntly if Kuroki was into someone. Following the code of honor, Hibiya replied that he would never betray his friend, but Kazami, a bit looser, revealed he did think there was someone Kuroki liked. This gossip earned Kazami a cheap pinch, which he actually enjoyed, understanding why Chinatsu had sent the protagonists to fetch soda. Kazami seemed very interested in the scoop, asking if the lucky girl was the one with black hair, which made Chinatsu laugh, saying the girl had a name. The boy got excited and wanted to know more about the case, but Chinatsu, being gossipy, made a point of saying she wasn't gossiping out of respect for Chihara's feelings. Trying to dodge, Kazami, with his cynical way, claimed he was actually concerned about Chihara's feelings, and Chinatsu was astonished by the boy's apparent sensitivity. Meanwhile, Hibiya was more lost than a blind man in a shootout, overwhelmed by information his brute brain couldn't handle. Our couple returned to the table announcing they brought the sodas. And to cover up the gossip, Chinatsu grabbed the microphone to announce that the lovebirds were back, which Kuroki found a bit exaggerated. Chinatsu wouldn't let go of the mic and invited the couple to sing karaoke. But Kuroki started sweating nervously since it wasn't his thing and tried to come up with good excuses to avoid the ordeal while his friends helped themselves to the soda tray. Chihara, on the other hand, didn't seem bothered and sat down with a tablet for picking songs in her hand. The girl, confident with karaoke, announced she'd try singing her favorite song. To Kuroki's shock, Hibiya didn't look like someone who'd be easily impressed, but Kazami wore a slightly curious expression. Meanwhile, Kuroki widened his eyes in disbelief at learning Chihara's favorite song next to Chinatsu, who was super excited waiting for the performance. Our girl prepared the mic and everyone grew tense. Then she let her voice out, delivering a flawless performance of a song obsessively about Joses. Each person had a unique reaction to Chihara's performance, and the girl was quite pleased with her 45 points as judged by the karaoke machine. Kuroki was walking through the school hallway, worried about the upcoming exams, when he was caught off guard by Chinatsu approaching, calling him intimately Kuroking. The boy found the expression strange, while Chinatsu remarked he had a dead fish face. Our protagonist revealed he was thinking about the exams, but the girl seemed chill, so Kuroki asked if she and Chihara would form a study group, and he was surprised when Chinatsu replied they wouldn't. Curious, our boy wanted to know if they were the type to study alone, but Chinatsu, as the queen of inventions, had another wild idea. The girl approached Kuroki with a calm expression and suggested he invite Chihara to study. He'd be pleasantly surprised. Kuroki watched her walk away and was left with a bug in his ear when the girl told him to give it his best. Kuroki got out of bed yawning, still very sleepy, but something unexpected caught him off guard. Chihara looked like a ragdoll, jumping on his bed while calling out to him in a slight panic. Several Chiharas were in front of Kuroki, bothering his breakfast. He thought he might be hallucinating, but the mini Chiharas kept popping up with the same peculiar manner he knew so well. Kuroki noticed that little Chihara fit in the palm of his hand and saw in her eyes that she wanted to climb onto him. Our boy was in a daze as he lifted the mini Chihara in his palm, not understanding what was going on. She stared at him pleadingly, and Kuroki felt how warm she was, like a cute, fragile pet. Distressed, our boy was afraid of hurting such a defenseless little creature. But he remembered he had to go to school, and decided to take her with him while the little Chihara wanted to play. He put the girl in his backpack and walked towards school, worried about the dangers of the world. When the school bell rang, Kuroki checked to see if the mini Chiharas were okay, and he was startled by what he saw come out of his bag. They had multiplied and turned into several black kittens, and human Chihara made a point of grabbing one. She placed it on our boy's head along with the others that spread across his body. Kuroki was watching Chihara as always beside him in the classroom. But that specific day, the girl seemed full of determination. Summoning courage, our boy decided to ask what was going on with her, and Chihara looked at him, ready to reveal something. Chihara was truly determined and invited Kuroki to follow her. The boy suddenly frowned and said he would accompany her with equal determination. He didn't know where they were going, but he followed her, confident in whatever the girl wanted to show him. And he was stunned by the size of the house they were approaching. In front of the gate, Chihara said that was her aunt's house and that she would go there from time to play. She looked into the yard and showed Kuroki a big, fluffy, snow-white dog ready to welcome them. Kuroki was shocked by the size of the dog and asked about the girl playing with the big guy. But Chihara seemed truly determined and revealed she had something in mind. With great conviction, she said that one day she was going to bathe that dog, and Kuroki found the obsession a bit unusual. Kuroki asked why she couldn't, and Chihara, without taking her eyes off the canine, replied that they were still in the bonding process. And while the dog looked at them with a goofy face, the girl said that this big boy was very stubborn and hard to deal with. The dog got close to Kuroki, and the boy barely moved his lips to call Chihara. The girl was surprised by how he reacted to the dog, but soon they decided to use some toys Chihara had brought to play with the animal. It was an interesting afternoon, and the dog seemed to enjoy all the objects to catch and chew. The girl sat in the garden gazing at the horizon, and Kuroki wanted to comment on the lack of compatibility she hadn't noticed. Chihara looked back and stared at Kuroki as if she wanted to say something. Then she stood up and extended her hand to Kuroki as if expecting something in return. Kuroki widened his eyes, not believing she was behaving like she was asking for a paw. But the dog was smarter than the boy and placed his paw on Chihara's hand. The two found it very amusing how the dog looked at Kuroki, as if trying to teach him how to act in these situations. Our protagonist felt his face blush as he had a positive impression of the dog and concluded that the big guy liked Chihara. The girl felt happy and took it as a compliment because the feeling was mutual. Chihara and Kuroki decided to take the dog for a walk, and the boy was surprised by how well the animal behaved on the leash, so Chihara said she had done this before. Chihara grew curious about how far they could go, but Kuroki said it was getting late and they should go home, which Chihara gladly accepted. The girl was having fun with the animal at the park during the walk, even making him go down the slide and rubbing her face in the dog's white fur. Night had already fallen, and Kuroki decided to ask Chihara if it wasn't a problem for them to be hanging out together. But the girl didn't understand why that would be a problem, while Kuroki considered himself a nuisance. Chihara, looking at the dog, asked why Kuroki said things like that, and for a moment, the boy thought she was talking to the animal. But Chihara was speaking to Kuroki, and given that, she wanted to know why he kept going out with her if he felt like a bother. Kuroki stammered, embarrassed, as he really hadn't expected such a question. But looking at Chihara, what he really thought was that the girl didn't care for those kinds of answers. So calmly, he tried to find the right words to explain, and both the big dog and Chihara seemed to wait anxiously. But Chihara couldn't wait long for the boy's conclusion because a force started to pull her from her left side, about to drag her away. And suddenly she said she was being taken on a forced walk, and Kuroki didn't have much time to think. He quickly raised his hand and held Chihara's hand firmly. The two looked at each other tensely, but the dog seemed to like what he saw. In the end, the animal didn't run, and our boy felt embarrassed for having held Chihara's hand, trying to explain himself out of fear of her reaction. But Chihara, very firm, looked at Kuroki and asked him not to let go of her. They looked at each other for a while in that park, and Kuroki said he wouldn't let go, and Chihara agreed. Despite feeling his face warm up, Kuroki didn't let go of Chihara's hands, and the girl gave a slight smile, painting the moment with a gentle mood. Back home, the dog went to its little house, satisfied with the walk, and Kuroki learned that it was a difficult task, which made Chihara remember her aunt, who walked the animal without breaking a sweat. The productive day made Chihara ask for a repeat, and Kuroki replied that he would be looking forward to their next meeting. Chihara waved goodbye, and our boy watched her enter her aunt's house accompanied by the dog, saying she wanted more too. Kuroki received a call to pick up his sister while waiting for the train at the station on the way home. The boy got worried because he wasn't sure at which station he was supposed to get off, but he felt the presence of the red-eyed angel guiding him once again. The boy was startled to realize that Chihara was by his side, and the girl asked if he was going to her house, but it was just a happy coincidence. Kuroki tried to explain that he wasn't following Chihara, but she didn't seem interested in that kind of talk, so he said he was going to pick up his little sister at their grandmother's house. Chihara wanted to know which line the boy was taking, and Kuroki said it was that one indeed, which made Chihara look pleased since they were heading in the same direction. Inside the train, our boy started thinking about how often he was running into Chihara, but his low self-esteem always made him feel like a nuisance. Chihara widened her eyes as if she could read Kuroki's mind, then suddenly turned to him and asked him to come closer. Suddenly, the train doors opened and 50,000 people entered at once, which caused Kuroki to press against Chihara, and the two practically defied the laws of physics. Crushed by the crowd, Chihara explained that a lot of people usually boarded this route, and the boy, embarrassed by the physical contact, said he'd get off in 3 stops. Chihara, being very helpful, said she'd let Kuroki know when it was time for him to get off the train. But for him, that feeling of being squeezed next to Chihara turned out to be better than expected, although he didn't know where to look. Kuroki stared at Chihara, but the scent she exuded seemed more mysterious than her intriguing eyes. Then suddenly Kuroki realized how tall the girl was and blushed because of it. Looking up, merely getting a stiff neck beside her, the boy could only imagine one thing. Chihara reminded him of his childhood friends from that distance, which brought a mix of sensations and emotions flowing through his existence. The station finally arrived, and Kuroki got off alongside Chihara, saying he nearly suffocated with so many people in that train car. That's when Kuroki realized Chihara had also gotten off the train and asked what she was doing there. But the girl, in an imperative tone, simply ordered him to keep walking and not say a word. Kuroki and Chihara arrived at the grandmother's house to pick up the little sister and noticed the girl looked a bit down. Kuroki said he was there to pick her up but wondered what was making the child so glum. When she saw them approaching, the little girl called out to Chihara and confessed that she had lied to her friends. And Kuroki was in disbelief when his sister said she told her classmates he looked like The Rock. The boy then asked why she would say something that would make her friends disappointed in him, and the girl explained they were talking about brothers. Regretful, the little girl lowered her head to apologize, but Kuroki tried to comfort her, saying it was okay. That's when Chihara joined the conversation, understanding the girl's point of view, that it wasn't a problem if she saw him that way. Then the little sister felt embarrassed because that would make her look weird for loving her brother too much, which made Kuroki say he felt suffocated just hearing them. That's when the little girl looked deep into Chihara's red eyes and decided to ask how much she liked Kuroki. From afar, our boy widened his eyes and Chihara stared back at the little sister, preparing to respond. The question hit Kuroki like a bolt of lightning, and he looked at the girl in shock at the boldness of saying something like that so directly. And before Chihara could begin to answer, Kuroki brought his hand to his chin, imagining various possible responses she might give about him. Then he felt paralyzed because even though he wanted to know what was coming, deep down he preferred to run away. But Chihara was just as direct as the question and said she liked Kuroki a lot of things. Kuroki froze in time, trying to understand the subliminal message in Chihara's answer, hoping that a lot of things meant good things. Little girl still seemed sad, and Kuroki, to break the mood, said he would go tell their grandmother that they had arrived. Chihara hugged Kuroki's little sister with a tender embrace that made the girl's eyes pop open. Not satisfied, our protagonist lay over the little girl as if wanting to protect her from all harm. The little girl felt Chihara's affection, and the two stayed there cuddled up until Kuroki returned. But when he came back to call them because the snack was ready, Kuroki was stunned by the scene he witnessed. The two had fallen asleep, snuggled together like best friends, and the boy realized how well they got along. When they woke up, Chihara said that sleeping with contact lenses was definitely not a good thing to do. Some students were having physical education class, and Kuroki realized he had forgotten about it, but he was calm since no one got mad about it. After all, he was a student who maintained a good daily routine, and while he was thinking about that, Chihara was staring at him, sitting on the schoolyard steps. Kuroki noticed she was looking at him and asked if she also wasn't going to participate in the girl's activity. But Chihara didn't answer and suddenly pulled out a pistol and aimed it at Kuroki's head. Our boy froze, imagining that maybe all the rumors about Chihara being dangerous were true. Kuroki raised his arms to show surrender and said he had forgotten something. He kept talking, saying that he usually checked what to bring to school the night before, but maybe he just wanted to buy time while asking Chihara not to kill him. Chihara seemed nervous with the gun pointed at Kuroki and very determined said that excuse wouldn't work. Showing herself merciful, Chihara allowed Kuroki to say his last words, and the boy blushed thinking about saying what he really felt. Then, with a flushed face, he took a chance and started talking about the day they went to the zoo. But Chihara, impatient, pulled the trigger and a jet of water hit Kuroki's face. Kuroki even asked her not to shoot, but for Chihara, that one was already on his tab. Realizing he was unharmed, Kuroki asked where she got that pistol, and the girl said she found it in the school's storage room. In her calmness, Chihara said she had fired discreetly, but for Kuroki it was frustrating not to have a revolver to retaliate. So Chihara told the boy to wait and left to get something, quickly returning with a racket. Looking at the object, Kuroki questioned why Chihara had chosen the worst weapon for him. But without much talk, the girl told him to get ready. Then she blasted another stream of water at the boy's face, and by reflex, he used the racket. But it worked, as well as trying to block the sun with a sieve. Kuroki realized the racket hadn't helped much, so Chihara offered to help him dry off. Not knowing what to do, our boy held the racket in front of his face, and Chihara, already impatient, told him to move it so she could help. While PE class was happening, Kuroki asked why Chihara wasn't participating, and slyly the girl glanced sideways at Kuroki and said she would tell him the reason. Kuroki felt embarrassed when Chihara, with her mysterious tone, asked him to come closer so she could whisper in his ear. The boy leaned in, and you could almost feel Chihara's lips touch his ear. The couple got distracted while Chihara found Kuroki's ear cute, and they didn't notice the teacher, with crossed arms staring at them up close. Kuroki tried to control his emotions after the girl's comment, but suddenly, the teacher decided to inform our protagonists that they would be having supplementary lessons. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.